one wants to take that option away when we know it can be effective.
There are currently 378 hospital-at-home programs in 39 states. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Lilly Endowment, a private foundation supporting NPR's coverage of religion and spirituality, and Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
All right, welcome in, welcome in. You're listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. I'm NBC 10 Boston's local woman, Sue O'Connell. I'm here with former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral. We're in for Jim and Margery. They're going to be back tomorrow. And we're live at the Boston Public Library, so come on down and see us. And, of course, you can watch us on youtube.com/GBH News. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Sue. It is always a pleasure to be with a local woman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We're going to start the show today with this. A new Emerson poll found that despite the noise online, most voters do think that killing a CEO in broad daylight is unacceptable. I can't believe I'm actually saying
Breaking
those words out loud. But the poll shows what we're going to call nuance and a divide among younger voters. And here's the stunning part of the poll. The support for the alleged shooter, Luigi Mangione, from people under the age of 29 is 40%. They say, at the very least, that the murder was acceptable. So the lines are open at 877-301-8970. Have we reached a point of American nihilism where political violence is something that we have come to expect and accept? We saw this in the polling before the election, where an increasing number of voters expressed concern about political violence post-election. Or is it just that we have reached the point where violence generally is an acceptable response to whatever it is that makes us angry? And what do you make of the charges of terrorism against the alleged shooter? Under New York law, terrorism charges can be brought when an alleged crime is, quote, intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, end quote, or influence policies by, quote, intimidation or coercion. What's your reaction to the fact that 41% of people ages 18 to, I think it's 29, might be 39, support this murder? Mangione's terrorism charge, how do you feel about that? And the fact that hundreds of January 6th rioters faced lesser charges even as they committed an insurrection. 877-301-8970. Call or text with your thoughts. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, Andrea, I think it's important to note that none of these things are happening in a silo, right? You know, the attack on January 6th attack on the Capitol, that's one thing. That we live in an almost fully armed society is another thing. And that we have a generation of kids who have grown up, who are young adults now, who grew up with a very different relationship to their medical insurance than you and I may have grown up to, right? I grew up being told, union household, this is a great benefit that we have. This is going to keep us from going into great debt. You have to have medical insurance if you're an adult. That was like the most important thing I grew up hearing. And these kids have grown up watching their parents, even their affluent parents, even their middle-class parents, fighting on the phone around insurance and having arguments around medical insurance coverage, which I think has portrayed the medical insurance business, which it's a business, it probably shouldn't be a for-profit business, but it is, as a bad guy, I think, in many of these homes.
And it's put it, quite frankly, at odds with providers, who also, we hear a lot about fighting with their insurance company, or the companies that insure their practices. They pay pretty high medical malpractice insurance rates, but they bemoan the bureaucracy and the problems that they have just treating their patients, prescribing for their patients, recommending procedures for their patients that insurers tend to deny. We actually have some kind of ironically humorous sound on this, though, but people will remember, this is something that most people can relate to, the movie The Incredibles, which is actually one of my favorite movies, where Mr. Incredible is working at a corrupt insurance company, which eventually just pushes him to the edge.
Denied? You're denying my claim. I'm on a fixed income. And if you can't help me, I don't know what I'll do.
All right, listen closely. I'd like to help you, but I can't. I'd like to tell you to take a copy of your policy to Norma Wilcox on Norma Wilcox, the 3rd floor, but I can't. I also do not advise you to fill out and file a WS-2475 form with our legal department on the 2nd floor. But there's nothing I can do.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I know you're upset. Pretend to be upset.
But it's real.
It's real, and this is a movie that was out when this generation were kids, and
Right.
the message is already baked in. Medical insurance companies are bad, right? So we shouldn't be surprised when many of them. I just want to make one more point before we get to your calls and texts. We also have a generation of kids who have been able to reach out and ask for mental health help. Right? That we are a society where we keep emphasizing how important mental health is. How many therapists take insurance?
Right.
Very few. And they
Right.
tell you we don't take insurance. It has to be out of pocket. We'll send you a super bill. You could submit the super bill and get a fraction of my costs back. And the reason why is because they can't deal with the insurance company. So we have a law here, right, that my mental health is as important as my podiatry health. But my podiatrist will take my insurance, but my therapist will not. So you have now kids in crisis who are told the insurance companies are terrible. They see their parents having to pay, $200, $300, $400 an appointment for a therapist that isn't covered by the insurance that their parents are already paying for. So this is where we live now.
And people not understand, and that's part of the reason I think that the ACA or Obamacare pushes so hard to have mental health coverage. And there are some plans that actually do cover it. But the other thing I don't want to leave out is that we have also grown generationally anesthetized to the concept of murder. So beyond the specific frustrations or disaffection people feel for particular industries in this country, we have also generationally raised our kids to accept, whether it's in gaming, in our TV shows, or whatever else we see, this concept of murder. School shootings, we live with it every single day. So there's being benumbed to that is part of this, I think.
All right, one of our texters, Anonymous, the reaction to Brian Thompson's murder is troubling, but it's clearly indicative of something bigger than just frustration with the healthcare industry. Mangione is an outlier on the extreme end of the spectrum, but I believe the majority of Americans feel powerless as the rich continue to squeeze the middle and working class of their wealth. The balance of power and wealth in our system is grossly out of whack.
No, I think that that's an excellent point, and most horrific acts evoke a response that tells you what the zeitgeist is in the country, and this is just one of them.
All right, let's go to Lisa in Medford. Lisa,
Hi,
thanks
Lisa.
for calling us. Welcome to Boston Public Radio.
Hey, thank you. So excited to be talking to you two ladies. You're my favorite fill-in host.
Oh, thank you.
This is an awesome opportunity. Yeah. I work in the industry, and I have for a long time as a consultant, as a full-time employee. And I have to say that I was, in some respects, stunned by Brian Thompson's murder. I was stunned because of the brazenness of it, not because of the reason behind it. And, you both and Jim and Margery have been talking about this a lot. We've all been talking about this a lot. It's that feeling that we're actually being killed by the companies that we're paying to insure us, right? And as an insider, I could tell you, I work in the behavioral health department of my company. There are some wonderful clinicians, doctors, nurses, social workers. There's tons of programs, but it's the access to the program, and it's the feeling that insurance companies put on you that so you're responsible for your health. You're going to pay us to insure you, but really it's all on you. And by the way, we only want to do the cheapest interventions. So I'm not, like a lot of people, I don't condone this at all. But I'm also not surprised by the frustration. I listen to my parents struggling. I'm in my mid-50s. I'm anticipating my own, struggles when I retire with trying to get benefits and care. And And, and there are therapies in not just mental health, but if you look at the offerings that are out there, right? All these companies are advertising on TV. Take this pill, take that shot,
Right.
do this program, and you
Such a
can't
good point.
get it. And it's so frustrating when you say, okay, I want to take charge of my health. I want to take advantage of the opportunities. And like, no, we don't cover that medication. We don't cover that service. And to your point about mental health, as I mentioned, I work in the behavioral health department. And when I felt like I needed mental health services, my own company couldn't find me a therapist that would take our
That's
insurance.
amazing.
No, it's a 6. I'm telling you, it is at least a 6-month wait in the Boston area for a therapist that your insurance will cover. It's an outrageous. I laugh every time someone says, "Well, they should reach out and get help." I'm like, "Well, they're a crisis right now. How long do you want them to wait? How many calls do you want them to make?" So, Lisa, thanks so
Thank
much
you very
for your
much
call.
for the
We
call,
really,
Lisa.
Really appreciated it. And I think the other part too, Andrea, which we talked about before the show this morning, is just also the reaction. I think we all know that if someone really wants to murder someone and doesn't care if they get killed doing it, they're going to do it. That has always been a challenge. But the coming out and saying out loud, even when someone, not this person, not Thompson by any means, but someone despicable gets killed, often there would be some sort of, well, I feel for his or her family.
Right.
It's terrible that this crime was committed. And there seems to be a lack of that in this case.
And I think that itself is the response, in part, to the lack of empathy people feel that insurers have against them. One of our anonymous texters said, "What do you think was going to happen when the law no longer works?" And when you think about it, insurance companies have a business model that no other industry really has, one where you pay them a premium and they sort of, and in some cases people would say arbitrarily, but ultimately to make money, deny you the coverage that you thought that you were going to have when you signed up with them. And their entire model is built on you paying them and them never having to pay you. And that has allowed to it's run amok. And the income inequality, the money that the people who are in the decision-making seat are making versus the resources that the people who need the help have, that disparity is just far too wide. And I think you're seeing that reflected.
Let's go to Murray in Newport, Rhode Island. Murray, welcome to Boston Public Radio.
Hi, Murray. How's Rhode Island?
Oh, it's beautiful today. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. No, we have beautiful sunshine down here. So I'm a retired Navy captain, and I was in the Navy for 30 years, and I never had to ask a patient how sick they could afford to be. And I always think that's just a wonderful model on what we did for healthcare in the military. I retired 10 years ago, and trying to work in the private sector, I was just always frustrated by the amount of paperwork I would have to do to try to get a patient an X-ray, an MRI, a procedure. And I almost felt like I was dealing with a casino in that the house is always going to win. The insurance companies are always winning. The other thing I wanted to bring a point up is that when the next president of the United States takes over, he had said famously, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. When you have that type of attitude where the leader of our country says that, you're normalizing those types of behaviors. It's never right to murder anyone, and I'm actually very embarrassed to hear my fellow countrymen say that it was the right thing to do to murder this person. The blame part of it needs to be on the physicians. We really gave everything to the insurance companies. And I need the American public to rise up and say, look, health care is a right, not a privilege. Every American should have the right to mental health, dental, full medical care, just like we do in the military. We would have a happier and healthy country. But the American people are really getting ripped off by the insurance companies. And that's partly why I got burnt out and why I finally retired, because all I was doing was talking to insurance companies all day, trying to get an X-ray. As a 30-year physician, I know patient needs an MRI. I know when a patient needs an X-ray. And it was just amazing. I felt like I was talking to high school graduates on the phone who were telling me, a well-trained physician, what I could not do for my patients. So
Murray, thanks for such a great call.
Thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts.
That's great.
Thank you for the call. He's absolutely right. I've heard it from my own doctor.
Listen, I had, when my daughter was younger, she had a neurological appointment, specialist appointment, and they said, we'd like to get a head scan, brain scan right now. We're going to go right now. And they said, let's just call your insurance company. And the insurance company said, well, can it wait? I said, I am actually in the specialist's office who knows much more than me saying, I want to get it done right now. So the choice is either we go to the emergency room and you pay more to have it done, or you say, yes, the doctor who's looking at her right now has decided that it's something that we need to do right now. It is just, it's mind-blowing. But to Murray's point as well, you know, we have been warning you about this
for a very
decades.
Long time. Yes.
You have chosen not to vote for people or demand from people to have a single payer or have Medicaid for all. We have chosen time and time and time to ignore this, and now suddenly everyone is recognizing that we should not have a for-profit medical insurance industry in the United States, and it takes this incredibly criminal and blatant, terrible act for people to pay attention.
No, but isn't that actually the entire history, probably the history of the world, but certainly the history of this country, where things have to reach that kind of critical mass? But here's what I will say. We keep reaching a critical mass. We've reached critical mass in school shootings and a variety of other things that just absolutely scream for us to pay attention. And we keep crossing that line, nothing gets done, and then we move past it to the next horrible thing. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the wake of this.
All right, let's go to...
I just want to say that our texters are kind of, they're not saying that murder is acceptable, but they're saying, as the stand-up comedian says, but I understand. Kevin from Auburn says, I'm a retired physician assistant. Throughout my career, I've had to witness children and families say goodbye to their loved ones because they weren't covered and refused treatment by healthcare insurance companies. These CEOs have the blood of tens of thousands of lives on their hands. This person says they applaud Luigi Mangione. I think their attention should be paid to this.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's not going to get any better.
Well, as another one points out, we keep saying that the crime was committed in broad daylight. I'd like you to bring something to light, of course. You would do in the day. How many people died in broad daylight because of the health insurance?
Very good point.
You know, and you also talk about you finally get your dad to the doctor, right? Your dad doesn't want to go to the doctor. You finally get him to the doctor, and they tell him to wait, come back for another test. He doesn't go back, right? I mean, and what happens?
Right.
All right, let's go to Quinn.
That's making the money by attrition, just by people dropping out of the process. Hi, Quinn.
Quinn in Framingham. Yep, we hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wanted to share that we are very lucky in the state of Massachusetts for our mental health care that is significantly more accessible than in other states throughout the U.S. And I wanted to give a shout out to community behavioral health centers, CBHCs, that are a new, maybe in the last 2 years, they developed in the state of Massachusetts that runs through insurance. That is very accessible. You can walk in. It's open 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 9 to 5. Every sort of community has at least one. So I work at the one in Waltham. We have one in Framingham. There's one in Boston. They're all over. And in most of them, they also offer the mobile crisis intervention, which if someone is in crisis, they can call this 800 number and get immediately seen for a sort of crisis evaluation to help determine if they need a higher level of care, if they need hospitalization, or if they need outpatient, if they need intensive family therapy. They can call that phone number. Is it all right if I give that phone number?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so in the Boston area specifically, it's 800-981-4357. If anyone in Massachusetts calls that number, they can then be transferred to the local MCI number, and they can go in person to the person, out in the community, to their home, to the school. School-based clinicians usually will call them and if a young person is in crisis. So it's a really wonderful resource. So if you know someone that is in active crisis, call that number, and then they can be referred to a local CBHC. There is, of course, some wait lists in some of them. In Waltham, we currently have 4 people on the waiting list, so it really is not that long of a waiting list. It just depends on which one you're in. So I really recommend that people seek those services.
Thank you, Quinn. We got to take a break, but thank you very much for all of that information.
Thanks so much. All right, we're going to take a quick break. As Andrea said, we're going to take more of your calls and texts next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We're live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We'll be back.
In recent years, more and more countries have been closing their borders to migrants. Thailand is bucking the trend by creating a path to citizenship for almost 500,000 stateless people living there.
It's so bold that they can really serve as an inspiration for this region, but also on a global scale.
That's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Babson College. You can learn to lead with impact and become a driving force for change. Babson's virtual graduate admissions workshop is on January 7th. Registration at babson.edu/gradworkshop. And Rogers Fish Company, founded by Roger Berkowitz. You can give the gift of New England seafood dishes, including double clam chowder, crab cakes, lobster, and fish delivered to your doorstep. Online ordering at rogersfishco.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Andrea Cabral. I'm here with Sue O'Connell, who is in for Jim and Margery. We're both in for Jim and Margery. No, Sue's going to be in for Jim and Margery just by herself from now on. We're live at the Boston Public Library, and we're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Margery are going to be back tomorrow. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about a new poll showing that 40% of young voters find the murder of a healthcare CEO at least somewhat acceptable. Given the morally corrupt and dehumanizing state of our healthcare system, how are we to respond? Is this the road we've been on as a nation since at least January 6th? And where's the off-ramp? Give us a call or text us at 877-301-8970. Again, that's 877-301-8970. And Sue, we've been reading the coverage that I think it's a 10-count indictment that has come down against Mangione. He's also being charged with terrorism, which, as I talked about in the intro, is defined the way I described it. Well, I'm looking at the texts that we're getting. Now, we have a reasonable listenership for this show. I would consider them pretty reasonable, level-headed people.
Level-headed,
and the texts
smart.
are split between people saying murder is unacceptable in any circumstance, and he is an incredibly unsympathetic murder victim. Mm-hmm. It's between that and I don't care. He had it coming. Mm-hmm. So there's not a huge range of response that we're getting here. How do you think that bodes for the jury in New York looking at him being charged with terrorism when they consider his victim to possibly be a terrorist?
Well, I can't even imagine how unsympathetic the victim is going to seem to the jury of random people if these random people who are participating with us are having that point of view. It's really, the terrorism charge just seems like an overreach to me. Of course, it looks like the New York district has been famous for a little bit of overreach.
Right. This is the Southern District.
The Southern District has been. But I also want to note, Andrea, what's also fascinating to me is I grew up in the 60s and 70s in gritty Revere, Shirley Ave. Violence was an everyday thing. We lived in the 60s and 70s in a much more everyday violent society. We are in the safest time in American history for almost everybody than there ever has been. Yet this is the reaction to a murder, right? So at the same time, school shootings, terrible. We're all armed. Guns are everywhere. We're still safer than we've ever been. But somehow we have integrated that a behavior like this is okay because of the cost of what our health care is and what it does to our families.
And it's also a process. How we're inert to violence is a process, and very intentional on the part of some. Let's talk to Lisa in Sturbridge. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, I'm so glad you took my call. Thank you. So I think the murder is completely indefensible. I think it's such a shame and a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to people that think it's okay. More specifically, I'm a nurse, and as I was telling your screener, I used to do these things called prior authorizations, where a patient would get denied for a medication that was beyond the general, the first go-to. And honestly, I loved it. It turned me into a pit bull. And I just loved going toe-to-toe with insurance companies and say, no, this patient tried everything you wanted. They need this. They have to have it. It can be frustrating, and I still deal with it now in a more removed way. What I do is I see patients who have extremely rare diseases. And I will say, I hope this offers some hope. Unfortunately, it can be a part-time job sometimes for patients to get the med that they need. But generally speaking, once they get approved, they stay approved because literally for some of my patients, there is one medication that will treat their disease. And if they don't have it, they will die. But on a more general note, there's a class of medications that are completely synthetic, so the body doesn't know how to reject it. And when I'm able to give a patient with a rare disease that kind of med, the results can be amazing. People who haven't been able to walk, who can walk, people whose quality of life is greatly enhanced.
Lisa, what's amazing to me, though, and this is the challenge, and I appreciate what you do, and I have people like you on my daughter's team. My daughter has 4 rare illnesses. And, the trying to find medications that don't interact with the other medication that she's on with this medication and that medication. I spend at least 2 hours a week dealing with insurance. I, at the moment, have an $11,000 outstanding medical bill. And I don't think I should have to. And I went to college. English is my first language. I'm pretty smart, and I have the time to do the 2 hours a week. I can't even imagine what somebody who isn't as privileged and fortunate as me, or doesn't get a pit bull like you, has to go through just to get treatment. I mean, it just is astonishing to me.
Thank you for the call, Lisa. We appreciate it, and we both appreciate what you do.
Absolutely.
Peter from Mystic, Connecticut, I think, has said this, says this in a very succinct way, and I think he's absolutely right. It's an excellent point. He says, I think it's hard for people to process a story that has no heroes, and that's what this is. And I would actually add to that, and it's in circumstances where Brian Thompson should be a hero. For people who need medical care.
Right.
And so there's the disappointment that comes with that as well.
And there's lots of people they treat. I mean, we should say, I mean, it's a serious, kind of where we are in the world, that the medical insurance helps a lot of people. And on a regular basis, it delivers what you need as long as you don't get too sick or need something rare.
Or for too long a period of time. That's right.
It keeps us healthy, and it's something that our grandfathers, grandmothers didn't have. So that's good news, except this is what happens.
We do have some texters that are weighing in, although the majority, I think, go the other way, that they are embarrassed by the murder of Thompson, that murder is unacceptable in any situation. Nancy from Scituate actually wrote a letter to the editor that she said was published yesterday. And Diane from Newton says, I think it's outrageous to discuss issues of insurance at a time that you're talking about murdering a CEO. She says, killing an executive is just wrong. I assume that she would think that killing anybody is just wrong, but she specifically mentions an executive. So there are people who just think that no matter what the situation, no one should be responding that a murder of any person is acceptable.
Yep. Jim from Pawtucket, can you talk to us in 30 seconds and give us your point, Jim?
Hi, Jim.
Hi. Yeah, I think that the audacity of the insurance companies does contribute to the feelings. I think, real quick, if I could just decide, I think that the younger demographic has this lack of the aversion to socialism that a lot of previous generations did. And I think that the concept of like class warfare leads a lot of people to not view this as murder. But separate and apart from that, I think that insurance companies, I'm a teacher. I have good insurance, and I've had to see a lot of specialists and go through a lot of care that somebody in their 30s doesn't usually have. And I get letters from, Blue Cross saying the visit you went to on such and such date has been deemed medically necessary. Somebody that the deceased CEO employed would send a letter like that to me, someone who doesn't have a medical degree, someone who's stamping envelopes. And it's like, my physician went to medical school and then sent me to that specialist or that appointment. I know it's medically necessary. Why is it your job to say, congratulations, the CT scan that your doctor ordered is medically necessary? I'm aware.
All right, Jim, we'll leave it there. Thanks for that call. That pretty
He's not
much
wrong.
puts the cherry on the top of this conversation. Yeah, you also really enjoy it when they say the claim that you filed. I didn't file the claim. I went to the doctor. So there you go. We appreciate your calls and texts and all of that. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to change gears a little bit. Get a little sunshine from GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're live from the Boston Public Radio and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
MIFA is a quasi-governmental agency that helps students pay for college. But student borrowers say, buyer beware.
They're private student loans, so they don't have access to the same types of programs that federal student loan borrowers have, like income-driven repayment or loan forgiveness programs.
Why would you create a situation where it's like this dehumanizing experience?
I'm Jennifer McKim. You can find the rest of that story online at gbhnews.org.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com. And Direct Tire and Auto Service, committed to transparency in the auto repair business. Their team will text videos on the vehicle inspection process to help you understand the work they are considering. DirectTire.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Andrea Cabral here with Sue O'Connell. We are in for Jim and Margery. We're live at the Boston Public Library. We're also streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Margery will be back tomorrow. They're going to speak with Dr. Ashish Jha, who is President Biden's former COVID-19 response coordinator. Our text segment today at 877-301-8970. Are you sick of staring at a screen? Going to bars only to watch sports and not actually interact with people? Maybe the solution is the humble board game. Remember those? Text us at 877-301-8970. Is your friendly group meeting up for a game night these days? And what's your board game of choice and why? We're joined now at the library by at the library desk by Jared Bowen. Really?
Hi, I'm Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Editor of GBH and host of The Culture Show.
Thank you very, very much, because I wasn't able to get it out. And The Culture Show, which I know you all love, which airs daily at 2 o'clock right after BPR at 8970. Hello, Jared. What can you do to lighten our spirits?
Lighten us, Jared.
Well, should we just go in the order that...
You could just talk about anything you want. We're just happy to have you here.
We were talking yesterday about the moldy chestnuts here on with Jim and Margery, of the things they like to talk about over and over again. But one of the things I love about the holiday season is the chestnuts are not necessarily moldy, and sometimes they get sizzled up in a way that make it very exciting. I was so happy to see Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol back up and happening at the Emerson Cutler Majestic Theater, getting great reviews. So we wanted to kick off with that, and if you could tell us what's going on with it. It's just so exciting.
Yeah, it's really, really nice, because hopefully this will be a new tradition. This is Commonwealth Shakespeare Company, which is presenting A Christmas Carol. You know Commonwealth Shakespeare Company because they present the free annual Shakespeare on the Common. And so they're expanding now, and they have this brand new effort. Again, it's at the Emerson Cutler Majestic Theater. It's playing through December 22nd. And I know it's funny when you say that, talking about chestnuts, because I love A Christmas Carol. I love every version, practically every version.
Even the Muppets?
Even the Muppets.
Even Scrooge?
Yeah, I love Scrooge.
I know, Scrooge is actually pretty funny.
My favorite movie version is the 1938 version. I think it's the first one I ever saw. So I was really, really excited when I saw they were doing this. And this really unfolds beautifully. First of all, they have assembled an A-list Boston cast to play all of the characters here. All of your favorites from Boston stages like Bobby Steinbeck, Catherine McCullough, Carolyn Saxon, Jared Troilo, Amy Doherty, just really Kathy St. George, all of the all-stars for the local theater scene, and they're all led by Will Lyman, who plays Ebenezer Scrooge. Will Lyman is part of our GBH family as the voice of Frontline, so that's an added bonus to see him assume this identity, the mantle of Scrooge. And the Commonwealth Shakespeare Company is very much hoping that this will be a great new tradition. But unlike their Shakespeare productions, where they often upend it and they set their King Lear in maybe modern times to give us this current perspective, this is set in London in 1843. We meet a group of traveling players who begin to present this Christmas carol. And it really unfolds on stage with more song, more color as it moves along, as we're moving out of this interior Scrooge into the way that he's opening up, especially as, of course, the spirits are guiding him through his past, the present, and the very dark future. And I just think it's a really beautiful production in that it sings. The music here is extraordinary. The costumes are beautiful. And again, I love the way almost, and this was their intention, almost like an advent calendar, it opens up more and more and more until you have this very robust production by the end of the show.
I like it. I can't wait to go.
Well, you know, A Christmas Carol was always good for, no matter what version you saw, it was always sort of good for, or intended to touch people's hearts and sort of make people realize about the spirit of generosity, or what kind of a wretched life you would lead if you were Scrooge, if you were miserly. And by the way, I had completely forgotten that there were two spirits in this, ignorance and want, that are depicted in the play, because it's hewing to the original, and that a young mother and baby sort of succumb to them in the play. It's that kind of stuff that the play evokes. It's supposed to evoke, you know, sort of the idea of being a better person. So what do you think the response to the play is going to be in 2024? Because it has real temporal significance to things that people are going through right now. What do you think the response is going to be?
Well, I can tell you what I experienced at intermission, which people were really heartened by this.
That's what I was wondering.
And they really opened up. And I think that this is significant to remember, too, that there's a great historical connection here, because Charles Dickens came here in the mid-1800s. He went to Lowell in 1842 in his first tour of the United States, and he saw the mills, and he saw the treatment of workers there. And so this, some would argue, partly inspired him to write a Christmas Carol because of the experiences he saw. And by the second time he came back to the United States in the 1860s, he was a major celebrity, and he stayed at what is now the Omni Parker Hotel, which is just basically about a 10-minute walk up the street from the Emerson Cutler Majestic Theaters,
Right.
which is, I think, fantastic that we have this connection. But when he walked out of that hotel, he was swarmed. You think of Taylor Swift and what happens today in terms of people flocking to her. This happened in Charles Dickens' time, so celebrity is not at all new, and it was because people were so moved by his story. People were so moved by the way he was commenting on contemporary society, and I think, to your point, Andrea, it's at least what I saw in intermission, it's resonating today.
And if Tiny Tim had just had that polio vaccination,
That's
I think things would have been very different.
Right,
So
with
it's
no
kind of-
RFK in charge
Yeah,
of
there
Health
you
and
go.
Human Services.
All right, let's shift over to another sort of
Well,
mirror.
did he tell? He said
No.
when.
Oh,
you
say
said
yes.
when. Yeah, where it's
It's
playing.
playing through December 22nd.
And the ticket discount.
Oh, great.
And, well, that's ended for a while. They had a
Oh, okay. It
ticket
was
discount.
first 5 performances.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But it was a good thing. So there
was,
you go.
yes.
All right. So back over to Harvard. There's an exhibition showing, an art exhibition showing how Germany, and actually many European countries we know right now, for folks who may not know, this past election, this in 2024, so many incumbent governments have been kicked out or moved out, and populists have moved in. And this exhibition at Harvard is showing and mirroring the German tensions against our own tensions here in the United States. Tell us about it.
This is really interesting. So a number of years ago, they did an exhibition that looked at the art of Germany during the war. So what was actually being produced during the Nazi regime? Well, this is sort of a continuation of that, and because we have a very different Germany today. And it's essentially looking at what happened after the fall of the wall and as immigration opened up in Germany. And I mean, a few facts that Germany has the second highest immigration after the US. It has the fourth largest economy. And so you find today they're in a society where more than 20% of the population have some sort of migration background. That is, one of their parents came. So what does this mean when you're not necessarily all German? So that's the title of this show, is Made in Germany ? Art and Identity in a Global Nation. And it's looking at art that has been produced over the last 20 or 30 years where they're interrogating this question: what does it mean to be German when your population is changing because of things like immigration? And so we have artists who are addressing that through customs that are brought into Germany. They're addressed through videos, like a Turkish family dancing down the street or walking down the streets where attacks against immigrant populations have happened. So there are no answers here. This is why it's the question Made in Germany ? But it's really posing how people are churning through this time, because there is a lot of hate that has swelled up too as we see this populist sentiment, this nationalist sentiment rise up that doesn't want to be all inclusive. So it's, I think, while they didn't necessarily intend this to be a commentary on the United States, you can certainly draw parallels to what's happening here and what Germany has already been experiencing at the forefront for the better part of at least 20 years.
It's just, yeah, I have a family that just moved back from Germany, and just talking about what Germans are saying they feel like they're going through sounds a lot like Americans, what Americans say they're going through, too.
It's this identity crisis, and obviously some people can deal with a changing society better than other people can deal with a changing society. I think one of the most interesting pieces, by the way, because we have all manner of art, from public art that was put out questioning what does it mean to be German, to a large installation of a room, but it's turned upside down, so you're not walking into the room, you're seeing the room on the wall, and it was this idea of what the West would be like after unification, and you would have modern things and modern furniture. So a set decorator has created this room where you have some of those things, but for instance, part of the phone is made of bone, it's prehistoric, it's almost like the Flintstones, because it's juxtaposing this notion that you can move forward, you can have contemporary things, while at the same time people are looking at you as backwards and from prehistoric times. So this is incredibly layered.
We're talking with Jared Bowen,
who is, by the way, the GBH Arts and Culture editor. Indeed. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. But Jared, before we leave this, my issue is whether or not we learn from history, because I remember reading when all of the incredibly racist attacks, that people were being murdered in Germany. I was reading about it at the time and thinking that this country was sort of at least symbolically shaking its finger at Germany, like, how could you not learn after World War II? How could you not? And we are now there. We are now there where we're seeing this sort of rise of Nazism and anti-immigration sentiment. And so I'm wondering if an exhibit like this is going to be instructive enough. Like, I kind of think history, waves its arms at us by the roadside, and we're like motorists in the Twilight Zone. We just keep driving by, and every 2 miles, history comes cropping up again. I don't know that we're going to necessarily pay attention to what, because art has a lot to teach, and I don't know if we're going to pay attention to it.
Well, yeah, I don't know either, but I think it's interesting that we have an entire exhibition of artists who have been pointing this out there, again, for 20 or 30 years, and enough so that you can put an entire exhibition together and bring them into totality with all of these different viewpoints of it. So, artists
what does that say, that we have enough for an
society?
Entire
Exactly.
exhibit? That's true.
All right, let's stick with the moving around the world category. I actually thought this topic, the Brutalist, was going to be about City Hall, Jared.
So did
I was
I really
shocked.
thought it was a documentary about the city, about the building.
But
Which
it
it
is
could
not.
be,
It
because
could be.
it's about to be. It was designated. I learned from your station.
Yes, at NBC 10 Boston, our I guess Michelle Wu's favorite building in the world is designated as a national
historic landmark.
Historic
Which
landmark.
is Never pretty tear it exciting.
Down.
And the Brutalist theme, and this film, The Brutalist, has nothing to do with City Hall, but from the great, what's the name of the production company? A24.
A24
which does
is killing it.
incredible stuff. The Brutalist is about a Hungarian immigrant who, about the time of World War II, comes to the United States. And what happens to him, Jared?
Well, I can tell you, first of all, so this is a film that opens on Friday. It had a number of Golden Globe nominations, 7 Golden Globe nominations. This will be a big contender in the Oscars, I guarantee you. And what happens from that first travel outside of Europe is we find this architect, played by Adrian Brody, stumbling out of the darkness, stumbling out of this ship. And it's dark and it's claustrophobic, it's disorienting. And when he finally surfaces from this ship, his first view of the Statue of Liberty is of it kind of upside down. So this is the way he's catapulted into America. And this follows this 3-hour film with an intermission.
3 hours.
But it holds. This really holds. In fact, as I was thinking about it, knowing I was going to be talking to you both, I was thinking, I need to go back and watch this again. Now having seen it once, because it's so layered, there's so many great details to it, I need to see it again. But we find this man, who we come to learn was an architect. He had studied at the Bauhaus, which was inspired the modern art movement and architecture and buildings like City Hall right here in Boston. But he is trying to get a foothold in America because he is an immigrant coming to this country, having just survived the war, especially as a Jewish immigrant coming to this country from Hungary. And he finally gets this commission to design a library through this very wealthy man in Pennsylvania, played by Guy Pearce, who is definitely going to get an Oscar nomination. Guy Pearce is outraged because his son has ordered this commission without him knowing, but then he comes to see the beauty in what he's done. So then he commissions Adrian Brody, who has been struggling to find jobs, struggling again to get this foothold, to design a building in America. But it's all about this layered notion of what it means to be an immigrant and to build something, and that you're always at the whim of somebody, again, this wealthy American. And I don't want to say much more than that, because you really have to experience it, because it's big, the performances are big, the screen is big, the shots are big, and it's a really well-told film. It's very strong. I think this is going to go down as one of the classics, ultimately.
Brody does well with these. Like, you remember The Pianist? He got an Oscar nomination for The Pianist. These sort of really deep method actor type roles. Can you talk a little bit about who plays the woman who plays his wife?
Yeah, she's Felicity Jones, and so she is ultimately brought over, and we learn that she had studied at Oxford and really talented writer, but she is subject to just writing for a woman's column because she can't get a foothold either. And she's somebody who's also suffering terribly from osteoporosis because of the malnutrition she experienced during the war. So layer after layer, I think this is really strong, and there's an intermission, so you can take a little break halfway through. When's the last time we had a movie with an intermission?
Even Wicked made you sit right through, right?
That's right.
Part one.
No snack time.
Speaking of moving, Jared, we have a whole street that needs to move to a new neighborhood. Sesame Street.
I can't believe this is happening.
Has been with Max, which is part of the Warner Brothers world, the Discovery world. We won't tell you the whole thing, but Sesame Street was living with the distribution company owned by Max, which used to be HBO Max, of course, and now they are no longer going to be distributed by Max. Their 55th season, they're looking for a new home. Max is saying, we're not doing kids' TV, we're not investing in it. What's the outlook for Sesame Street?
We don't know. Well, we do know. I think it's likely that Netflix or Amazon are going to pick this up, but this renews this debate about why this is all happening. People who haven't had kids at home in a while may not even realize that Sesame Street is no longer necessarily a PBS thing, because, as you mentioned, a few years ago, Children's Television Workshop decided to strike up this relationship with Max, and it created this divide and a lot of criticism because you could only access new episodes of Sesame Street by having a subscription to Max, and belatedly, about 9 months to a year later, they would surface on PBS. So there was concern about inequity, that if you were disadvantaged and you couldn't pay for the Max subscription, you were getting things much later than everybody else, something that had always been in the public realm. So why was this happening? So what we're seeing now is this moment. Oh, by the way, Max also, about a year or so ago, pulled a number of episodes back, so you couldn't even get even if you have the subscription, you couldn't go back to look at cult
Why?
favorites
Why
like
do that?
the episode where Mr. Hooper dies and Big Bird is talking about death, which was a seminal moment for that show because it was a way to discuss death with children. So this is what some of the streaming services have done. I don't know, maybe it's cost effective to not have them all available. The archive, I don't know how the streaming works, but it just didn't work. And now they've just decided to get out of the business of children's programming altogether, which means somebody else needs to come in and swoop it up. But it's not going back to PBS necessarily in terms of PBS being the primary broadcaster and producer. At least that's what they're saying at this juncture. But this also comes at a very critical time where the Senate has a bill moving forward, basically called the No Propaganda Act, to defund PBS, to defund NPR, and this is a concerning time.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah,
There you go.
there's a lot that I would. Yeah, it's just this devaluation, and I hope that Disney picks it up and offers it somehow at a reduced cost, or where you don't have to do the. It's perfect for Disney.
Well, Disney always finds a way to make money, even if they give it to you for free. So it might be a Disney home. All right. I tried to explain to Andrea before the show, Jared Bowen, who the Gold Dust Orphans were, who Ryan Landry is, why Rosemary's Baby Jesus is such a holiday tradition here. So I'm going to ask you to just explain to my delightful guest co-host, Andrea Cabral, in less than 3 minutes, what this is all about.
So, the Gold Dust Orphans. Why do you leave it? Have you seen this production, by the way? This
not
year?
this year.
Not
No,
this
no.
year. So, for the background.
I've never seen it. I had no idea what it was.
And you don't know the Gold Dust Orphans?
No.
So, the Gold Dust Orphans, when they first emerged as fringe theater in this city, they were performing in the Machine nightclub in the Fenway, and you would have to.
And even before that, they would be in basements.
Let's see, that was even before my time.
Yes.
And maybe
I do
wouldn't
know
have-
the Machine nightclub.
Yeah. So you would go down these deep, dark stairs. You weren't quite sure if you'd get all of your clothing back by the time you're going to walk back out. But it made it so much fun and saucy and just adventurous. And they were putting on these major productions like Mary Poppers or Peter Pansy or other titles that I can't repeat on the radio.
Yeah.
Always taking these known properties like those two and then giving them the Gold Dust Orphans spin so they would be raunchy and they would be really satirical. Always have heavy social commentary, but through this hugely comedic lens. The city has changed. They've been in play for more than 20 years now. They have received the Sustained Excellence Award from the Norton Award, so they've gone a little mainstream. They've gone so mainstream that they actually cast Jim and Margery in the last couple of years of productions.
That is mainstream.
We all went together for a team outing on Friday. I was included to be able to go with the whole BPR team, and we saw Jim and Margery at play as animals. But this is a spin on Rosemary's Baby. It's Rosemary's Baby Jesus. And so we find a woman who is, well, she's not too hot on her husband, who seems to be not too hot on her, but suddenly she finds herself pregnant, and we know the whole
Baby Jesus
unfolding
story.
of
And the
Rosemary's Baby story.
It's the neighbors in the building. In this case, it's the House of the Seven Gay Boys because it's not the House of the Seven Gables. It's taking place in Salem. Ryan Landry plays Mrs. Grinch, who's presiding over this building.
This is
and they're doing
hilarious.
untoward things.
Yeah.
While also spinning in Celine Dion songs and songs from Hairspray and Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. So basically, it's a panoply of outrageousness, but huge, huge talent. There are some really, really great singers. We've all seen over the years, people start in Gold Dust Orphans productions and now are on the main stages in Boston. So it's also a great fermentation ground for Boston performers.
So it's like an X-rated Randy Rainbow on steroids.
Yeah, this one's a little more R-rated for once. But yeah,
R-rated. Okay.
Don't bring the kids.
Yes.
Okay.
Or bring the kids.
And bring
my kids.
and bring
then,
clothing that you can afford to lose.
Right.
Apparently.
That's right. Well, now it's at the Lithuanian Hall in South Boston, so it's a little more sanitized.
We used to play a game like who's going to have to walk out when they would come in, like who was dragged to this and didn't know. All right, Jared, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jared.
Jared, of course, executive arts editor and host of The Culture Show right here at 2 p.m. Coming up after the noon news, a Wisconsin school shooting perpetrated by a 15...
More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Browdy and Margery Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Cure Alzheimer's Fund, which supports vital scientific research into the causes of Alzheimer's disease, because research is the only path to a cure. Learn more at curealz.org. After the devastating fire at Notre Dame, 2 mysterious coffins were discovered underneath the stone floor. Who's buried in them, and what secrets will they reveal? Find out on Nova, Lost Tombs of Notre Dame, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
This is 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you.
I'm Andrea Cabral, in for Margery Egan. Ahead on hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, we're talking with Juliette Kayyem, Harvard professor and longtime national security expert. We'll get reflections on yet another school shooting, this time in Madison, Wisconsin. Plus, Juliette's take on America's full-on drone panic, why we shouldn't lose our cool over the unidentified flying objects above us.
And I'm Sue O'Connell, in for Jim Browdy. Then we're going to talk with Linda Matchan. She's the editor for Globe Santa and the Greater Boston Food Bank's Catherine D'Amato about ways we can help each other during this giving season. And our text prompt of the day, step aside, hula hoops. The latest youth craze is board games, offline, old-fashioned board games. What's your relationship with board games? Which games do you gather around and play, and why? That's next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments January 10th over the constitutionality of the federal law that would ban TikTok in the United States, unless its Chinese parent company ByteDance sells it. The justices will weigh whether the law infringes on TikTok's First Amendment rights to free speech. The U.S. government's worry that China could gain access to sensitive data in the U.S. through TikTok. The short video sharing app that's popular around the world has more than 170 million users in the U.S. alone. Congressional leaders released more than 1,500-page bill last night that would fund the federal government through mid-March. NPR's Barbara Sprunt reports this comes just days before funding is about to lapse.
The broad legislation includes roughly $100 billion in federal aid for natural disasters, funding to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, which collapsed in March, and wide-ranging provisions related to health care and consumer protections. But lawmakers, including various factions of Republicans, are frustrated by Speaker Johnson's handling of the process, the tight turnaround, and the size and scope of the bill. The federal government is on track to shut down at midnight on Friday unless lawmakers pass the legislation and send it to President Biden's desk. Barbara Sprunt, NPR News, the Capitol.
Hundreds of programs that provide hospital-level care in patients' homes across the U.S. are at risk of losing federal coverage at the end of the year. Craig Lamolt of member station GBH reports that Congress may renew the waiver that makes those programs possible.
The waiver dates back to the COVID pandemic and allows Medicare and Medicaid to pay for care delivered at patients' homes, with visits from doctors and nurses, as well as 24-hour virtual monitoring. Nancy Foster of the American Hospital Association says patients don't want to lose access to this kind of care.
They like this option. They want this care in their home, where it's more comfortable, where they are surrounded by their loved ones. So no one wants to take that option away when we know it can be effective for the patients.
There are now 378 hospital-at-home programs in 39 states. For NPR News, I'm Craig Lamolt in Boston.
The Russian Security Service says an Uzbek national carried out this week's deadly attack on a top Russian general. A source from Ukraine's security service confirmed to NPR that it was behind it. On Monday, Ukraine indicted Russian Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov in absentia for allegedly using banned chemical weapons during Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A day later, Kirillov and an aide were killed outside the general's home by a remotely detonated device. U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow is up 153 points. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Craig Lamolt. Members of the local disability community say they're pleased with new federal rules aimed at making air travel easier and more dignified for passengers who use wheelchairs. The rules include increased training for airport workers who handle wheelchairs and better support when a wheelchair is damaged, as well as new penalties for airlines that do the damaging. Flying has long been a challenge for people with disabilities, with thousands of mobility devices damaged each year. Colleen Flanagan's wheelchair fell victim on a flight out of Logan in 2023. She says the regulations are good news.
I'm hoping that the new rule making it easier to penalize airlines that damage wheelchairs will prevent wheelchairs from being damaged in the first place.
In October, American Airlines was fined $50 million for mistreating passengers with disabilities. 2 endangered North Atlantic right whales have been spotted about 50 miles off Nantucket, entangled in fishing gear. Amy Knowlton is a senior scientist with the New England Aquarium.
Unfortunately, the 3-year-old male has an entanglement configuration that could lead to its death because it's a young whale. It's going to grow into that gear, and that's a concern. The female, her entanglement indicates that she may be able to shed the gear, but this is her 3rd entanglement in her life, and that really affects their ability to reproduce.
Knowlton says the whales were too far offshore for rescuers to attempt to disentangle them. She says 2024 has been a particularly bad year for the endangered right whales. 3 right whales died this year by vessel strikes, as well as the dependent calf of one of those, and another died by a vessel strike. There are just 372 right whales known to be alive. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for chefs and designed for restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
All right, welcome back to hour number 2. Andrea, my gosh, it's just flying by here. We're at the Boston Public Radio. I am NBC 10's local woman, Sue O'Connell, here with former Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, and we're both in for Jim and Margery. We're swapping back and forth. We're swapping. Right now, I'm going to be Jim. So get ready, Kayyem. Just hang in there for a second. We're live, obviously, at the Boston Public Library. You can come down and see us. You can stream us at the youtube.com GBH News, and they'll be back tomorrow, allegedly, Jim and Margery. Hello, Andrea.
I have to say, your embrace of the local woman moniker is truly impressive.
Well, when you're insulted by the Boston Globe, I feel it's important to really make it part of your
brand. Lean in. I think leaning in is the way to go, Sue, and I think you're great for doing it. So before we get to our next guest, I just want to remind the audience about our text segment today. You have to text us at 877-301-8970. We want to hear about board games and you. Is your friend or family group meeting up for an offline, good old-fashioned game night these days? What are your games of choice and why? Text us at 877-301-8970. As Sue said, we are now joined by our national security expert, Juliette Kayyem. Local. Our local security expert. Juliette Kayyem, she's a former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama. Also the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and a contributing writer for The Atlantic. Hello, Juliette.
Hello. Hello, Jim. Hello, Margery. So I have to say one thing. So they're back tomorrow. So, did they just know I was coming? And then, it sounds like
they specifically said that this morning.
They said, yeah.
Juliette is on. We'll be in tomorrow.
I wore green. Hello, holidays.
Happy holidays.
All
right. So let's shift to the, of course, disturbing news of the shooting in the Wisconsin school. The school shooter. Again, we're still information is still coming out. You'll tell us what the latest is, of course. But what we do know also doesn't. It both fits with what we expect things to happen. Also doesn't fit with some things, and also I heard some different messaging. I don't mean to be glib, but messaging from people around guns around this shooting, which I'll get to after you.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So, another school shooting and the numbers were changing, whatever, but I think what the two interesting things are how are each of these different or how is it the same? One is obviously she's a she.
Right.
Which is just rare. Looking at the numbers, I think you're at 1%. This is going to be very gendered, but the stereotype is that young males use gun violence or use guns for, behavior that is aggressive and not personal. So they'll go into the school, they'll go into the movie theater, they'll go to the concert. where women, when they do use guns, because that's even rarer in terms of murder, are more intimate, someone who does something to them, a slight or a perceived slight or an abuse. And so they're going to be looking into that. Why did she choose this school, her relationship with her parents? So that's the first piece. It is such an outlier that you sort of have to ask yourself. And then why would she choose this school and what was going on at the school? The second piece, which I thought was interesting, was at least the public officials from the beginning and the school officials really did use these press conferences. They were very aggressive. I really thought that was good in terms of coming out, even with not imperfect information, and sometimes they had to correct it. As sort of what one might call a teachable moment, which is just, talking about guns, talking about interventions. What did we know about her? What did the parents know about her? The parents are apparently being cooperative, so we'll see if that holds, or if this is going to be a case in which the parents ought to have known. But none of these cases ends with, oh, that's so surprising. She woke up and decided to shoot up her school. Like, there will be social media. I think at least the early reporting is she sort of liked to post pictures of her with guns. She might have had right-wing elements or something. The question, her relationship with her parents, we don't know about. So we will learn more.
One of the things I was struck about yesterday were some of the commentators and the pundits and the security people who are do this like you do. Often weren't taking the opportunity to say, this is why we need gun laws or gun reform. They were focusing on, because of her age, obviously, we need to make sure we are locking up our guns. Like, the most basic entry level to gun safety is that if you have a weapon at home, you should have it secured and locked up. And if you have children in your home and teenagers, regardless of their mental state, their happiness, or their success, the gun should be locked up. Do you think that this is one of those moments where people can finally understand, you have Second Amendment, you have a registered gun, we don't know anything about this gun, but if you do, lock up your gun at home.
Yeah, I think, absolutely, and I think that commentary is a reflection of we will get no gun legislation in the next 4 years. So looking at other, intervention points. So one is going to be access. So ownership that's going to be untouchable for the next couple years, and part of the access issue is, of course, prosecuting parents who are grossly negligent. To be clear here, these cases against the parents aren't like bad parenting cases. These are the equivalent of like aiding and abetting. Like, you knew your kid was this way, your kid was saying they were this way, and you handed them a gun as a Christmas gift, or you left the gun there. So I think those cases may have some disciplining aspects. And then I just want to be clear, like, the data is clear. It's hard to prove a negative, but at least in terms of the interventions that are out there, that communities that step forward and begin to really think this is in the realm of possible are able to get the kind of help that some of these kids, or not kids, but some of these people, well, some of them are kids, sorry, need to protect other children. That's essentially what it is. It's not just protecting this child. If this child commits suicide, that's horrible. If this child does a mass shooting at a school, the societal, it's not just the number of dead, it's the societal ripple impact throughout these communities, which lasts forever. I mean, the Sandy Hook families, that's not like it doesn't go away. I mean, or the community there.
It's always an and as opposed to a but. It's not like other countries don't have children that have difficulty in schools that don't. It really, at the end of the day, though, it really does end up being the guns. Like, Wisconsin does not require a background check to purchase guns. This particular school was a Christian school, I assume private school. They don't have a mandated school threat assessment team. They don't even have the sort of hardened security that some of our public schools in the wake of over 200 school shootings this year have put in place. But it is unusual. I think I don't want us to be distracted by the fact that it was a girl this time, right? Remember the girl the I Hate Mondays girl? I think she was a school. Very rare. Spawned a song and all kinds of memes. And I think that's definitely worth looking at. But at the end of the day, and they said the parents weren't going to be charged with anything sort of right away. And I thought, but do you actually know how the gun was secured?
Surprised.
How do you put the assessment of this and the narrative that's come out of it thus far in terms of whether or not we're where we should be in responding to this?
Well, I mean, yes, one could always make the argument that the schools should be more hardened. And then you tell me where they're going to get the money for that. You tell me how kids are going to go in and out of classrooms. And you show, I mean, you know this, you show me a defensive posture that doesn't have vulnerabilities, right? Especially if you have people going in and out. So, the focus on why didn't the school have X, Y, or Z, I was actually kind of impressed how much they did have, given
that it's a Christian school.
And,
the fact that you shouldn't need any of it.
And it's 300 kids, or however many, it wasn't that many kids per class. I think what we're going to see is that there probably could have been personal interventions done, which needs to be part of the repertoire. But I'm an and person too. But you can't, there will be, it's so obvious, but even if we got the most hardened schools, there's going to be a soft element to it at some stage. They'll be in the parking lot.
It's a school. It's not a prison.
Yeah, or they'll be on the bus, or they'll, and then everyone's going to say we should need a security guard on the bus if there's an incident on the bus. So it is a combination. But I do think that the idea of comprehensive gun legislation in the world that we're about to enter in January, that isn't happening.
So lock up your guns, people.
Lock up your guns.
All right, Juliette Kayyem. Yesterday I spoke about this topic that we're going to talk about with Jim and Margery, and Jim just really came down on me because I gave him an expansive answer saying all these things are true, and I was so delighted to see you here today with this topic because I think you're going to say exactly what I said, which makes me feel really smart because you're so much smarter than me. What's going on with the drones? What's the drone sitch?
Wait, where are you on this?
I was exactly where both of you are. There were drones in the sky all the time.
Look up, people. Look up.
Someone will study this from sort of mass behavior and copying, or sort of reflecting. So my analogy that I said on the Anderson Cooper show applies here too, which is, for those of you who go in the water on the Cape or elsewhere, and I'm in the water a lot, there's an app, I'm not going to say its name, which tells you where sharks are. And if you're surfing or if you're out in areas that are sort of further out than shore, it will notify you that there are sharks in the water. And I had this app because I didn't want to get killed by a shark. And then I realized the app was just telling me that sharks live in the water.
Okay, right.
So drones are in the sky.
I was going to say, are they calling the app to tell the app where they are? Because otherwise, how would they know?
Yeah, just crowdsourcing and whatever. But so all of a sudden you realize, well, it's giving me no context for is that shark going to kill me? Right? That's all I really want to know. The other ones I could care less about.
Shark psychic app.
Right, exactly. So drones are in the sky.
Yeah.
So there might have been, I will be interested in this. Look, there's also errant drones, and there's drones that fly illegally. So, or fly in areas that need to be protected. The rumor mill got way ahead of reality. You had a lot of public officials who were sort of convinced that the air flights that they were seeing or the drones that they were seeing were something more nefarious. You saw lots of pictures that were attributed or unverified of domes in the sky. It was crazy. And all of them have been assessed and analyzed by DOD and DHS, and all of them are expendable. Most of them are commercial aviation or what we would call man flights.
Or Orion's belt.
Right. Yeah. Orion's belt. That was hilarious.
Airplane, just a regular airplane.
Right.
But could they have done a better job,
Julie? So that was my point. It was oh my God. If the government does not recognize that with everything that happens, there's going to be a counter narrative or some weird explanation that takes off and proverbially shoot it down. I could not believe Secretary Ali Mayorkas of DHS did not address this publicly until Friday, and this was a week in the making.
This time we were being abducted by aliens.
Well, the one that was because you could get semi-serious people sort of pontificating about it was
Rogan.
But or even security people, that we do have drones that detect radiation. And so if you had a worry that there had been a radiation leak or that there was a dirty bomb somewhere near an American city, New York or New Jersey, you would deploy these drones. Now, first of all, you wouldn't be able to keep it secret because they wouldn't just be at night. They would be during the day when you would want to assess what the threat was. That narrative that there was some sort of nuclear radioactive activity on the ground and that the government was keeping it hidden and trying to detect where it was, that did get a lot of traction. That can be shot down. No pun intended. That can be shot down quite quickly, and they just didn't do it effectively. And then, of course, Trump steps in and says, shoot them down, which is the last thing you want if it's a manned airplane, or if you want to shoot a drone over a residential community, it might have an impact. So it's just one of those things where, you know, you saw it happening, and you know, sort of this other narrative, and you could not believe that it wasn't being addressed as real. Like, that's the way that to a lot of people is real. I mean, I was looking at tweet storms on Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever, where like serious people, like, you know, had like 20-part tweet storms or whatever they do on Blue Sky, and like assessing what it could be. And I was like, I think there's a much simpler explanation.
But Juliette,
sharks are in the water.
Yep, drones are in the sky.
But let's look at this realistically. This is, and I get it. The government has got to get much quicker on the draw to respond to this, and they should know a lot of that by now after this election, all the misinformation and disinformation. Yeah. But they're also charged with making sure that there's nothing to it first. Yeah. And that takes time. Yeah. So where's the happy medium between doing a thoughtful sort of investigation because the worst thing that can happen is that you tell people there's nothing wrong and something turns out to be wrong, and then you really suffer. Yeah,
that's where I thought they got tripped up, you know, because their first statements were, we don't know what they are, which that's the message I would have changed, but we don't view them as a security risk. I was like, okay, those two things don't go together, because if you don't know what, I think they could have early on say, you know, a high likelihood that these are manned aircraft or drone, commercial or private drones.
And this is how many are out there legally.
Give me a number, right? I mean, if you could just say, look, over New Jersey, authorized drones every night, there's going to be 20,000 drones in the sky. That would have been helpful. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, that's what I'm seeing, right? Yeah. I mean, and it's just going to get to be more, right?
No, my head was exploding. I mean, the Earth is moving, the universe, the galaxy is moving. There are stars in the sky, and when you have governors coming out saying, look, it's a drone array and it's Orion's belt. I mean, how stupid are we that we don't ever look up in the sky?
Well, it's the War of the Worlds, it's Cloverfield, it's Signs, it's all the movies that people watch that tell them that this is possible.
And I think it was just also like, you know, the sort of narrative of like government doesn't know what it's doing,
right?
And I think
if it does, it won't tell you the truth.
I actually think in this instance, government did know what was going on, and their messaging was was so bad that if you were like me, if like you're on the air and you're trying to, I kind of knew what it was. I always had to give a caveat because I was like, I'm hearing the government. I think they're saying this is nothing. They should just say it's nothing. Right. And if they need time to say it's nothing, say, give me some context to it so I know what, in fact, is in the sky.
But yes, this is a great. Be cautious about social media, because some of those images said this is AI generated on the image, and people were still sharing it by the tens of thousands.
I had to be super careful because I was looking at things and I was like, oh wow, it's like I don't even know what it was, but it did look. You know, sort of very odd, and people were playing with all of our minds. Right?
I miss the old days when we just had those Chinese balloons slowly going across North America. Remember the simpler times? We're speaking with Juliette Kayyem.
My favorite quote of the week, though, had to have been CNN was interviewing people who were like adamant that we were in the drone wars, and she says, "I just want answers, and I want to know why New Jersey." And it was just like so perfect.
Because I was like, War of the Worlds.
I was going to say that's your answer. Right. There's no war.
It's always New Jersey. If not New Jersey, where is it going to be?
It's always New Jersey.
So, TikTok, Juliette.
Yeah, did you hear
the ban is supposed to take effect the day before.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court just took oral argument because I was listening to you guys on my way in.
So what do you think?
Okay, here's where I am. I think we have a lot of issues with China. I think TikTok has just been sort of this convenient thing to look at and find. Like it's like. If the war against TikTok avoids a war against China, I'm kind of fine. Okay, whatever. But what we're seeing is the future vis-a-vis the Trump administration, which is a very transactional relationship with these companies. He's met with all the major CEOs of all the major social media and technology companies. He's getting money from them for his inauguration.
Right.
That's clear.
Millions and millions and millions.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the transactional aspects of this administration and the Trump family will. I don't know how this unfolds. I do know one answer to the question of is the Trump family going to be richer in 2028 than they were in 2024, and the answer is yes. Of course it is. And so that is. So the head of Trump had been very opposed to TikTok, and actually he's the one who started this. The Biden administration continued. It started the challenge against TikTok for alleged or real usages by the Chinese government to essentially get
and
information
it was really
about
because he
US
didn't like the
companies.
videos that were being made about him.
Exactly. Then he joined TikTok. Remember, he joined TikTok
because he
during
didn't
the
like Zuckerberg, who's now made the pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago and Bethany.
Exactly. So, and then now the TikTok guy that has. So the Supreme Court will hear the oral arguments. TikTok lost in the appeals court. The Supreme Court will hear the oral arguments about whether it has to either sell or disband in the United States on January 10th. Trump has now wavered on his opposition to TikTok. I wouldn't be surprised if they came in as amicus, somehow the incoming administration, but the outgoing administration is full throttle on this. I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I don't follow the sort of tech Supreme Court rulings. I have often found that the government's justification of a national security threat was more theoretical than real. And it could be, it's happening all the time and therefore we're not seeing it, that the Chinese are having access. Look, the Chinese are in our telecom systems. This is like the most underreported story right now. Like they're everywhere, and so we've just chosen TikTok as sort of like the proxy.
Yeah.
There may be before that there may be an American buyer, and then you create a sort of litigation wall, right? So that you would have the U.S. company, and a lot of people make their money on TikTok. So it would have a financial consequence, but.
Juliette, are we just at a point now? I mean, I kind of gave up worrying about my data at some point. I mean, are we just there yet? I mean, what are they getting from us?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's still an expectation of privacy or intimacy, like when you're, talking to someone or whatever, especially audio, because I like, I walk around Fresh Pond and like I totally anticipate there's cameras there. Like I would have guessed that there's security cameras. But if I had learned that someone was picking up on a phone conversation, on a conversation I was having with a friend, especially a government entity, that would sort of even defy my sense of privacy at this stage. And then, there's all ways to protect your privacy and stuff. I have found, I don't know about you two, but I have found that the attempts to get in through links and the text and everything else, it just seems to have gotten much more aggressive in the last couple of months. Like if I let my guard down, like little things like, did you authorize this $23? And I'll about to press the link for Chase. And then I'm like, wait, that doesn't look like a Chase.
You got to go to the website.
I know.
Or you were just at Fidelity doing something and then you get a text from a quote unquote Fidelity and you're like, well,
I mean, and some of it is those phone numbers, like, they'll some scammer has gotten like 5 of the 7 digits of my kids when they were in high school, my kids' high school. So every parent is just going to answer, right? Because it looks like it's the school. And it was just some scammer that if you have your guard down, you might start answering or you might whatever. But I have found myself I'm a little bit more vigilant now because of that. I've just found it was so much more aggressive. And I've signed everything to not be bothered.
Mm-hmm. You're still going to get bothered because we're not the consumer. We're actually the product. But my thing with TikTok has always been the constitutionality of ordering a sale, whether or not it is constitutional to force a company into that decision. You can ban it. Yeah. You can say this is not good for our national security. We're going to pass laws. Blah 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 blah. But telling them, or you have to sell it
What
to a
the
buyer.
business
We
decision
find,
is,
you
yeah.
know, that's always been my issue.
Yeah,
with
but
nothing
in the
else.
national security space, there is more precedent for that you would have, say, a parent company in Dubai, and then you would have a sort of protected company in the U.S.
that has to comply with
that
our
has to
rules.
comply and actually is not. There's actually strict rules. I only know this because I serve on a U.S. side of an international company, and there's a whole series of rules and security clearances you have to go through, and the board cannot. The board cannot. Sorry, we have a friend in here. Sorry, everyone. I'm just my radar went up, and here we go. Anyway, I will finish quickly. That you are not allowed to be directed by the parent company.
Right.
All right, Julie, bye-bye. Yes.
I
Goodbye.
bring friends everywhere I go. Okay, I like the green.
You're wearing green. Happy
I'm wearing
holidays
green.
to you, Julie.
Happy holidays.
Great
I'll see you in 3
Good to
weeks.
see
I
you.
forgot
3
it's the
weeks.
25th and the 1st. Thank you so
All
much.
right, we've been talking with National Security
go out there
expert
with
Juliette Kayyem. She's former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Barack Obama and the faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and a contributing writer for The Atlantic in her spare time. Coming up after a quick break, Globe Santa herself is here with Catherine D'Amato of the Greater Boston Food Bank. We're going to talk with both of them about giving to those in need this holiday season. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
After Donald Trump's election victory, some on the left are forming groups for personal protection and even arming themselves.
This is Minneapolis, Minnesota. We are one of the safest states for trans communities, and our trans communities are buying guns because they don't feel safe.
I'm Elsa Chang. That story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Subaru of New England. This winter, you can explore New England in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Outback. You can find your Subaru retailer at SubaruofNewEngland.com. And Brown University pre-college programs, where academically motivated high school students can experience college life, nurture their diverse interests, and make new friends. Applications for summer 2025 open January 15th. precollege.brown.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Andrea Cabral. I'm here with Sue O'Connell. We are both in for Jim and Margery, and we're live at the Boston Public Library. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Margery will be back tomorrow. They're going to talk with Dr. Ahish Jha. Everyone knows that charitable giving is not a competition, but if it was, the two women beside us right now would put us all to shame. Here at the library for a conversation to talk about their tireless work giving back to Greater Boston and what the rest of us can do to pitch in are Catherine D'Amato, the longtime president and CEO of the Greater Boston Food Bank, helping to feed over 500,000 people every year, and also with us, the Boston Globe Santa herself, Linda Matchan, the project's editor. By the way, go to globesanta.org and gbfb.org to help their holiday fundraising efforts. Linda and Catherine, happy holidays, and thank you both so much for joining us.
Welcome. Catherine, let's just start, and I hate to say the phrase I use all the time because it seems like I'm being corny, but let's set the table, shall we, for what
it's okay. It's a lot of food jokes. Go ahead.
What the Greater Boston Food Bank does for those who may not just completely understand who you support, what you do, how the other organizations rely on you.
Sure. Quickly, we're Eastern Massachusetts. We feed Eastern Mass, 190 different cities and towns, 600 different direct feeding organizations, pantries, shelters, community meal programs, all kinds of mobile markets, programs for veterans and elders. Anyone that's either delivering a box of food or giving a box of food or serving a meal is eligible to get They're food from the Greater Boston Food Bank. We have our warehouse here in Boston, and we have distribution sites all over Eastern Mass.
And when we talk about food insecurity in Eastern Massachusetts, can you define that for folks? Because sometimes I end up having these funny discussions with people like, well, how hungry are they? I'm like, well, first of all, that's not really what we're talking about.
Not really a good question.
Not a good question. Right. Send a donation now. But how are we defining food insecurity?
It means you don't have the intake, the nutrition intake or the meals during the day. So people do give up their meals, especially parents trade their meal money for lots of other things for their children. We all know that housing is very expensive in Massachusetts. Daycare would be the second one. Those are the two major trade-offs that are occurring in families. And even in the Globe Santa, a lot of those families that need a toy or a desiring toy, the same people, we're serving some of the exact same families across the Commonwealth.
And in terms of the need, give people an idea, a little bit about what the historic need has been and what are the current numbers, the most recent numbers, what are they showing us?
Sure, it's always been dramatic. So if you think of 1 in 10 or 1 in 12 or 1 in 8. So pre-COVID, it was 1 in 7 in our service area. It's now 1 in 3.
That's amazing.
So actually, and that carries the whole state. But that is COVID. So everything went up. Your housing went up, food went up, all the inflationary impacts that occurred, and they haven't come down. Or they've dropped, but they're not going back to where we were before. So in such, that means families and individuals just have to, that dollar doesn't work the same way. Today, you need $1.20 for the dollar you had pre-COVID. And so that's significant.
So, Linda, let's talk about Globe Santa with the Boston Globe Foundation. 1956 was the launch, I believe, of the Globe Santa.
It's such an institution.
I just grew, totally really my entire life have grown up supporting and being with the Globe Santa. Talk about what you do as an organization and how you're interacting and connecting with the people who they need to get some holiday joy this year.
Thank you. Well, Globe Santa has a very robust infrastructure, and I'm a piece of it. I'm the Globe Santa editor, which means that I read many of the letters that come in from families requesting gift assistance for their children.
So you're Santa?
I'm not Santa.
She's a Santa.
You're at least one of the project manager elves.
I'm Santa adjacent.
Okay, that's a good way.
I read the letters, and my job is to translate the letters into articles that run every day in the Globe between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so there's something like 16,500 letters, I think, this year that came in from families requesting help. And we have a team of about half a dozen people who read every single one of them. And every single one of these letters were from parents or guardians or grandparents or great-grandparents or other guardians of children are requesting toys for the kids because for one reason or another they can't afford or manage to pull that off themselves this year. And so in these letters, I go through hundreds of them, and I look for themes in the letters, and I try to write the articles that correspond to these themes. So that really gives me a sense of what people are struggling with this year, and it varies from year to year.
What's this year, do you think, is the challenge for many families?
Well, there's the perennials, of course. Yeah. There's the victims of domestic violence. There's the people who... It's funny, we were talking about COVID the other day, or earlier, and that reminded me that people are still struggling with the aftermath of COVID. We have a letter from somebody saying, during COVID, I was laid off from my job of 17 years, and since that time, I've sent out dozens of resumes, I've taken 2 low-paying jobs, my husband struggles with addiction, can't contribute to child support, and so this is keeping me up at night, please help. Mm-hmm. A common denominator this year is inflation, and this is a population that, of course, struggles for every penny to begin with. But inflation makes a huge difference to them. I mean, every 5-cent raise in the price of eggs means they're not going to have eggs this year, and on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So I definitely see that common denominator.
How have you both, over the years that you've been doing this and helping families and helping individuals, how do you feel the interplay between asking for charitable donations and the state of mind that the general public is in giving. Andrea and I were talking about earlier before the show how we were both individually raised by our very strong families to make sure that we were good citizens and to give back. And you know, I know that no Scrooge has a corner on the market. I mean, there's a reason why Scrooge existed a couple of centuries ago. But how's the appetite for giving right now?
This is Catherine. I think it's huge. I mean, there is far more need than the dollars can meet. And as Linda said, inflation is a factor across all costs that families are facing. So they're having to make tough choices. But the generosity is there. I think what's occurring is that many organizations need help, you know, due to state contracts might be different, or we are all anticipating that federal resources will be different, and therefore the philanthropy or the private needs will be greater. And so the burden on our society is going to become, I think, quite heavy. So whether it is a Globe Santa or food for those that need assistance, if it's housing, whatever it might be, families are going to continue to face some really tough decisions. The most we can be there for them, you know, do what you can. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter to me how many zeros are on that number. Some people, it's $1. Some people, it's 10. Some people, it's 100. The point is, do something. Just don't be idle. You can do so many different things beyond give money.
Linda, nearly 30,000 local children over holiday season will get gifts from the Globe Santa. The number 3 million children have been served over the past 60 years is amazing. But at the same time, doing this work takes an emotional burden, you know, reading the letters and writing the letters. How do you stay positive moving forward, especially through the holiday season, obviously knowing that you're delivering joy at the holiday time, but the need, you know, you're gonna be like Santa. I don't want to keep harping on it, but you're gonna roll your sleeves up December 26th and get right back to it.
I'm glad you asked that question, and the answer is somewhat mixed. It can be incredibly gratifying when you see the generosity that lies in the heart of so many people. Whether perhaps a lot of people who donate to us remember Globe Santa from years ago, and if they were not directly helped, their neighbors were or their relatives were, and they continue to help out. I think anybody who has compassion or who understands firsthand what it's like to struggle for one reason or another contributes and writes us beautiful letters. I think that's what keeps me going, is just seeing the generosity in the hearts of so many people. But I don't want to sugarcoat it. What I'm seeing this year, a little bit, for the first time, is a little bit of meanness in some of the comments that I see written to Globe Santa and some of the emails that I receive. I don't know what is happening this year, but I find that there's a sense that foreigners in this country are not deserving of gifts. They're taking things away from our children, which of course is nonsense. And still this sort of old-fashioned sense that if these people get themselves into tough situations, well, it's their fault, or it's something that they should have thought of before they had children, or something like that. I don't remember seeing that before this year, and I find that very disturbing.
I'm really grateful to you for saying that, because it does have an impact on giving. I think there are a lot of things at play here. I think a diminishing of the middle class. I think a middle class makes everybody more empathetic, middle class up and middle class down. And we've lost a lot of that. But I am really glad that you said that, because this notion that the things that I need I'm being deprived of them by someone else.
Exactly.
And even if that is true, the person who's being identified or the group of people who are being identified as depriving you, that's not who's got their hand in your pocket. And people just not understanding that. Immigrants are always a scapegoat. Poor people are always a scapegoat. So thank you. I want to thank you for actually saying that, and hope that what you said touches people's hearts to think about this a little bit more differently. But Catherine, I wanted to also ask you, so just this sort of, to me, personalizes this. When Rosie's Place gets ready or Haley House gets ready, for the holidays, give people an idea of how many people you are feeding and what goes into that.
Sure.
And the response you get from people simply for providing a meal that is so desperately needed.
Well, those are two of the 600 different organizations that get their food from the Greater Boston Food Bank. And all the food for them is free. And that's a really important thing for me, to go out and raise, $100 million a year in order for them to have free food, because you want that individual or family that comes to whatever door they're coming to be able to not feel shame, but to hold their head high and have dignity. There are so many people, with 1 in 3 in our state, that are experiencing food insecurity for the first time because the dollar just doesn't stretch. So 600,000 people in eastern Massachusetts eat something from the Greater Boston Food Bank every month. Now, they'll change. A family might stay 6 to 7 months. They're utilizing some assistance, some help before they can either get back on their feet, or the job changes, or they move, or their family helps them. There's a lot of things. Or they're not sick anymore, they get better, in terms of it. But so many people are giving. I make a lot of calls this time of year, and just to thank people. And when you get on the phone and then I say, "Hi, it's Catherine DeMott of the Greater Boston Food Bank," and you hear a silence beep, and I'm like, "This is not a solicitation call. Okay, this is a thank you call," and that sort of takes the defense down. Like, "Oh, you're calling to thank me," and I said, "I am, because we need you to stay with us. We need you to be there, and thank you." And I think you probably hear a lot of thank yous as well. I know our agencies that we serve are very grateful. They can do what they do because we're able to have that $100 million a year that has to be raised. Just like you have to go raise every dollar to buy a toy or get a toy. And the generosity comes from a lot. We buy a lot of food now, Andrea. We buy 75% of the food. So the donated food is diminished because efficiencies and supply chain systems are just so much better. There's just not that much waste in the system anymore. But we still need people to help us. But more importantly, if you do need help, we want to make sure you just go to gbfb.org and look at need help. We'll connect you to a resource in your community where you can get the food you need.
So, Catherine, what I'm hearing is that little note you wrote on my letter was not just to me.
That one. So I'm very fond of sending love letters to people and to thanking them, because part of that is just thank you.
Yes.
It makes a difference. And obviously your stories about people that have experienced the Globe Santa then coming back and giving. We hear that too, about people that have had to go to a food assistance program, get on their feet, and then they are strong givers.
Yeah, there are people in our family that,
Linda's, the volunteers for Globe Santa, there's a story actually in the Globe about them. Talk a little bit about the people who come to you to volunteer and the gratitude you see in the letters and from the people who benefit from Globe Santa.
Well, the volunteers are mainly in the form of individuals who, I think of them as sort of these pop-up groups who get together at holiday time. They're so random and decide to raise money for Globe Santa. So, for example, last night, yesterday I heard about it for the first time, but a gentleman who plays piano at different piano bars around the city every year has one night where he dedicates to Globe Santa, and he just while I was sitting here waiting to appear on the show, told me that there was something like $1,400 or $1,500 that people put in the tin can last night for Globe Santa. Awesome. We hear a lot of stories. A group of older people who moved from Boston to Hilton Head, North Carolina, have a Globe Santa night every year and raise money for Globe Santa. A group of women who live on Beacon Hill, older women also, have a party. They call themselves the Chestnuts, and they're going to be having a party tomorrow night where they raise money for Globe Santa. And these people are just sort of, as I say, pop-ups. They're not connected directly to Globe Santa, but they know about it and they know about its mission. And Globe Santa's kind of this funny old icon, He's going to be 70 years old next year. In effect, he's just a logo, really. But a lot of people really identify with him.
Linda, do you have a story or a letter from this year that you'd like to share with us and our listeners?
Do I have a story?
I
have many. Here's one that sort of speaks to the issue of people can be going about their lives doing just fine, and then something catastrophic happens. This year, our family went through the experience that made us all appreciate each other more. On April 28th, the apartment building where we lived burned to the ground. It doesn't exist anymore, and everything we had perished. Our hamster has passed, but our kitten Sultan was saved by firefighters. We received so much love and support from the people in our town. In our new apartment, we have a lot of empty space for new toys that you may send us.
That's great.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, you read the letters and you just, that's why I wanted you guys to really talk about the people, both the people who volunteer and the people who receive, to put that really sort of human face on it. And, you know, like you said, $1 or $10 or $100 or whatever it is, it puts good into the world and it helps someone. And it's not, you don't have to feel as though you're being deprived of anything in order for someone else to gain something from you.
And
be
as I
kind.
said, it can happen to anyone. There are people in our family had a fire just before Christmas, you know, back in the 1960s, and Globe Santa swooped in and was able to deliver Christmas and that's something we still talk about in the family on a regular basis. So it's, you know, it's this generational giving. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, just because you can cause, in a very small way, you can cause and affect a change in someone's life. And that does have memory. I think for whether it's, I remember when the Globe Center, we used to do that at our office. So you have these pop-ups, and we see that about with young people and service groups and folks that come together to do something. It's that act. It's the act of giving that is more powerful back than what perhaps you did for that individual or family. I mean, I say to my team every day, we have 135 people that get up every day, all through COVID, 7 days a week, worked. They rarely see the person they help, but they're helping 600,000 people a month that are able to eat, feed their families, feel better, go to school, sleep, go to work, be productive, and they feel great about that. They themselves as people, and volunteering is something is really important. You can volunteer, you can, give money, but if you don't have money, you can be in your community in wonderful ways. And I love toys. I think kids should have lots of toys, and I think they should have a home, and I think they should have food, and I think they should have a great education, and that's where that intersectionality of poverty. But a toy is just an incredible joy. You become normal. Mm-hmm. You're like everybody.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So Linda, I just want to, this is really quick. We have to do this in like 30 seconds, and I'll ask Linda first and then you. We're seeing the income inequality, the gap is widening. Are you seeing greater kindness and generosity on a corporate level? I just want to know if the people who are making the most money are being as generous as the people who make less.
Well, I can't speak for all corporations, but just this morning I came from a pharmaceutical company that actually the CEO just moved here from Chicago. He's been here like a month. And the first thing he did was to make a donation to Globe Santa because he heard about an employee who had been a Globe Santa child. And it was a very large donation, too. And so that was very, very heartening. It really did warm my heart.
I'm glad. Catherine, how about you?
Yeah, individuals are where most of the resources come, and they could be individuals that work in large corporations. Corporate giving has shifted, and it's changing, because corporations' focus is changing. So we hope that they stay in our community, and we hope they continue to be philanthropic.
And I hope they heard you just now.
Thanks to Catherine D'Amato from the Greater Boston Food Bank and Linda Matchan from Globe Santa. If you're looking to do some good this year, you can certainly donate through gbfb.org or globesanta.org. Thank you both. Up next, text prompt of the day. Are you sick at staring at a screen? How about a board game? We'd like to hear your thoughts. That's coming up next. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, and we are live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
Part of the GBH News Equity and Justice Unit.
Disability had its own civil rights movement back in the 1970s that's still ongoing today.
Senior digital producer Megan Smith.
And I think there's a lot of education still to be done about that movement as a civil rights issue. There's still so much work to be done on transportation, housing, employment, that the disability community wants to be at the forefront of these conversations about diversity, inclusion, and equity.
Elevating issues of equity and justice. GBH 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the Museum of Science, where their Fun for All Ages seasonal exhibit is now open. All aboard Trains at Science Park features more trains, activities, and magic. More at mos.org. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Andrea Cabral here with Sue O'Connell, our local woman, in for Jim and Margery. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It's time for our tech segment of the day. Today's is based off a New York Times article. It profiles Gen Z and millennial groups who are hungry for in-person interaction and turning to board game groups for community. What are the texters saying? Is the internet just so toxic that nobody wants to be there anymore? And what games are they playing? We're going to open with a little sound from Seinfeld when most people will remember Kramer and Newman took a tense game of Risk onto a New York City subway car.
I can't think, there's all this noise.
Or is it because I've left you teetering on the brink of complete annihilation?
I'm not beaten yet. I still have armies in the Ukraine.
The Ukraine. You know what the Ukraine is? It's a sitting duck. I think it's time to put the hurt on the Ukraine.
I come from Ukraine. You not say Ukraine weak?
Yeah, well, we're playing a game here, pal.
Ukraine is game to you? How about I take your little Boris?
Well, the lesson to be learned there is keep your board games at home. Don't take them onto the subway. But how about you? What do you like about board games? What do you dislike?
Well, we play a lot of board games in my home. A lot of puzzling and board games. I'm dyslexic, so I can't do any letters or numbers. But I do enjoy the trouble. I do enjoy Monopoly. I love making my kid cry by bankrupting her on a regular basis.
Oh, that's nice.
Let's look at a texter from Anonymous. My husband and I play board game and card games all winter. Categories Uno, Skip-Bo, Trivial Pursuit, and even Monopoly. That's a good one. Andrew in Sagamore. The Arkham Horror is a board game where you all compete against the game. Talk about timely. That's deep. Based on the H.P. Lovecraft literary horror genre, I love playing with my friends. See?
Dan in Randolph says board games are great for families or small groups of like-minded people, but card games like Apples to Apples or more adult ones like Cards Against Humanity, which I personally own, or Joking Hazard are easier and more inclusive for bigger groups. Another anonymous texter says, I'm 28 and I have a devoted board game group ever since I was in elementary school. Wow. I've had a group of 5 or 6 friends get together regularly to play board games for Sunday brunch. With a larger crew, we play the Donner Dinner Party, which is a mafia-style whodunit, or We're Doomed, which is working together to escape the world ending.
Ursula from Westford, our family loves playing board games and periodically gathers for game night. One of our favorite games is Canvas, where you create unique art pieces with these very cool cards based on rules that change every time you play. We also have an advent calendar that makes you solve a small puzzle each day to find out which door is next to open. That sounds like a lot of work. I just want the candy.
Anonymous texter tells us that their best friend and they are big-time board game fans. They get together regularly to play games, just them over beers with their families, and they bring one game to the table each. Their go-to games, everybody picks a different game. They play one round of each at a minimum. Their go-to games are Dominion, Quicks, Wingspan, and the Game of Life. Remember that one?
Mm-hmm, we have that. Margot in Rhode Island, we do a board game night every other week with our 9-year-old son. Clue and Exploding Kittens are favorites. Also, really like Don't Get Grounded, which is like Cards Against Humanity for kids. And Madeline and Brookline, our teenage kids and their friends have been playing the Jeopardy board game. There you go, a little Jeopardy game for you.
Yeah,
Andrea.
I love Jeopardy.
With my husband and myself, it's a lot of fun, and the generation gap in knowledge is very apparent. You know, I once was playing Trivial Pursuit with someone and won because the question was about Miami Vice, and she got very mad.
Why?
Because she wanted to have like a smart answer, and I won with Miami Vice. So there you go. All right. Thanks for all of your texts on this. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, CNN Chief National Correspondent John King is going to zoom in with the latest in D.C. politics, and stuff is happening down there. We're going to bring you up to speed. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are live from the Boston Public Library and streaming
at
UH on Saturday, January 11th for Sticky Bun School with Flour Bakery's Joanne Chang. She'll walk through making her signature sticky buns from home. A baking kit will be mailed to you. Just sign up by December 20th at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Beacon Circle patrons Lynn Bay Dayton and Bruce Dayton. Proud to support GBH 89.7 and the commitment to local, national, and global journalism that inspires, engages, and supports diversity in the community. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov.
This is 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you.
I'm Andrea Cabral, in for Jim Braude. Ahead on hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, we start the hour with the pride of Dorchester, CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. We'll talk about how his network plans to cover another 4 years of Trump and what he makes of ABC News bending the knee to the incoming administration to the tune of $15 million.
And I'm Sue O'Connell, in for Margery Egan. Ending our show, we're going to open up the phone and text lines. 'Tis the season for the office holiday party. If you don't have the foresight to fake that stomach bug, how do you make the most out of the annual forced fun, a year-end soiree with your coworkers? Does your office still do parties? And are you into them or are you sick of them? We want your definitive office parties, do's and don'ts. That's next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The Federal Reserve is expected to lower interest rates when policymakers wrap up a 2-day meeting this afternoon. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the central bank may be more cautious about additional rate cuts next year.
Markets are betting that the Federal Reserve will cut its benchmark interest rate by another 0.25 percentage point. The central bank has already lowered rates by 0.75 points since September. Lower rates make it less expensive to borrow money to buy a car, grow a business, or carry a balance on your credit card. Fed officials will also share some guesses this afternoon about where they think interest rates are going next year. On average, policymakers had expected to lower rates by another full percentage point in 2025 when they last issued a forecast back in September. That forecast for cuts could be dialed back a bit today, since inflation in recent months has proven stickier than expected. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Police searching for a motive behind Monday's school shooting in Madison, Wisconsin, are talking to students to determine if the 15-year-old shooter was bullied. The Washington Post reports court documents reveal the teenage girl had a turbulent home life. NPR's Katie Riddle covers the mental health consequences of mass shootings and says experts offer this insight.
There are patterns of behavior around mass shootings. Often, in retrospect, when a tragedy like this happens, those might seem obvious and people question why they were missed. But the vast majority of troubled adolescents don't commit mass shootings.
NPR's Katie Riddle. The teen shooter killed another teenager and a teacher. Police say she also injured several students and a second teacher before she apparently took her own life. The community held a candlelight vigil last night. More information is emerging about a person who was hospitalized in Louisiana after contracting bird flu. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says this marks the first human infection that has led to severe disease in the U.S. We have more on this from NPR's Will Stone.
The person was exposed to sick and dead birds in backyard flocks before falling ill. Genetic sequencing shows the virus was part of a genetic lineage that's been circulating in wild birds and poultry. It's also what led to the hospitalization of a teenager in British Columbia, Canada. This version of H5N1 is different than what's spreading in dairy cattle, which has caused most of the human infections in the U.S. Those have led to mild illness in agricultural workers. CDC health officials say there's still no evidence of person-to-person spread of the virus, and they say the risk to the general public remains low. Will Stone, NPR News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 137 points at 43,586. The S&P's risen 10 points and the Nasdaq has gained 43. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon with the latest from the GBH newsroom in Boston. I'm Craig Lamult. Massachusetts lawmakers have blocked the approval of so-called overdose prevention centers. GBH's Diane Adame reports the centers were not included in a compromise bill filed yesterday.
The Senate approved injection sites while the House did not, and it became a main sticking point in months of negotiations over a larger bill. The sites would allow people to use illicit drugs under medical supervision. Supporters call the sites life-saving, but opponents say they encourage illegal activity. The compromise bill is focused instead on other measures, like increased access to overdose reversal medication. More than 2,000 people in Massachusetts have died from opioid-related overdoses in each of the past 8 years. Diane Adame, GBH News, 89.7.
The Massachusetts company that a Natick man is accused of stealing sensitive drone technology from says it's fully cooperating with federal authorities. GBH's Tori Bedford reports.
Mahdi Mohammed Segedi allegedly conspired to funnel sensitive technology to Iran from his employer, Wilmington-based Analog Devices Incorporated. Prosecutors say the technology was directly linked to a January drone attack on a U.S. military base in Jordan that killed 3 soldiers and injured 47 more. In a statement, Analog Devices says Segedi has been fired and no longer has access to their systems or buildings. The company says they've cooperated fully with law enforcement and are committed to preventing misuse of their products or technology. Segedi, who holds Iranian and U.S. citizenship, is being held pending a detention hearing next week. Tori Bedford, GBH News, 89.7.
Increasing clouds today with a high in the mid-40s. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance. Progressive is looking for dedicated and forward-thinking individuals to join their growing team. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers.
Welcome back to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. I'm NBC 10's local woman, Sue O'Connell, here with former Public Safety Secretary Andrea Cabral. We are in for Jim and Margery. We are live at the Boston Public Library. You can watch us at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Margery will be back tomorrow when they speak with Biden COVID response coordinator, Dr. Ashish Jha. I would be remiss, Andrea, if I didn't mention in the last segment, we're talking about board games. My brother was a model on the Twister board game from the 1960s.
On the cover.
On the cover. So I just want to not be seated out on the back porch during Christmas dinner.
Well, I was going to say, you have to spend the holidays. Yeah, so I'm glad that you took the time to mention that. You're welcomed now in for food and for volley.
Yes.
We're now joined on Zoom by the person we call the pride of Dorchester because he is CNN Chief National Correspondent John King. Hello again, John King. I'm getting to see you 2 weeks in a row.
And am I hearing that, is this correct? You're going to peacefully yield power tomorrow back to Jim and Margery?
No,
is that how this works?
No, we're not. We're just going to take a page out of everyone's. Yeah, we will.
Well, I actually was. It sounds like Sue and I may not be on the same page on that, so I await the insurrection.
Well,
Andrea wants a break. Sue likes this. Okay, I got it.
Well, John, speaking of pages, some pages were released this morning. The Matt Gaetz ethics report. The panel has voted to release it. For folks that don't know, Matt Gaetz no longer in Congress, has moved on to a new career. This report looked like, unless someone leaked it, it wasn't going to see the light of day, but it is. What's happening here?
This is fascinating. It is not unprecedented, but it is very, very rare that if somebody is a former member of Congress, that the Ethics Committee then makes the report public. Normally, the idea is if you go away, you leave town, you leave Washington, you're not a member anymore, you're not an embarrassment anymore, they just hide it, right? They just decide to bury it. I call it juvenile justice. The reports are never made public, right? You become 17, 18, you move. So this is very rare. I've been getting our Hill team. We have a fantastic Capitol Hill team to try to find out exactly why this happened, because obviously it's an evenly divided committee, but some Republican, or Republicans plural, would have had to side with the Democrats to decide to do this. So why did they do it? Look, Matt Gaetz had very few friends in even the Republican conference. In the entire House, Matt Gaetz had very few friends. Matt Gaetz, since his nomination, very briefly, or Trump, never filed the actual papers, but since he named him as his pick for Attorney General, that went over with like a brick in Washington, D.C. But now he's an anchor, or is going to be an anchor on the OAN conservative, sort of a Trumpy news network. So somebody, at least one Republican, if not a couple, decided, you know what, we think this is important enough to get out there. I would say that the motive would have to be to, keep Matt Gaetz in a box, to convince people do not listen to this man now that he's going to have a platform on a small but a vocal conservative network that often causes Republicans fits when they're trying to do things.
And we should say the Ethics Committee report, it says, concludes years of probing into allegations against Gaetz about whether or not he engaged in sexual misconduct, used illicit drugs, shared inappropriate images or videos on the House floor, converted campaign funds to personal use, and or accepted a bribe, impermissible. I mean, the list goes on and on. But to underscore what you said, it is kind of shocking that once you disappear from Washington, D.C., it's sort of like all is forgotten. And there are at least one or two Republicans who are not going to let this fade away.
He rubbed just about everybody the wrong way. And they see him as someone who just likes to stir up trouble and cause trouble. And now they see that he's going to have a platform that, again, most of the people listening to this show, I'm guessing most of them don't tune into OAN on a regular basis. But there are enough sort of Trumpy conservatives, people who are mad at the establishment, who get mad when, even the Republican they loved yesterday does something tomorrow. And, Speaker Johnson's going through this right now with the temporary spending bills and all that. And so they see Matt Gaetz as having this platform, and they clearly see him as a potential problem, as a potential thorn in their side. And they are trying to let every last drop of air out of his balloon if they can.
John, I know you're well familiar with the saying that one campaigns in poetry but governs in prose. So Trump campaigned in what I will generously, really generously for me, call fantastic promises. He now has to govern in reality. Am I missing something, or is he of late been equivocating on some of the things that were so absolute to him, like his ability to immediately cause grocery prices to plummet, the sort of his enthusiasm for eliminating trans people from existence altogether? These are some of the things that we're reading about now, some of the comments that he's made recently that sort of indicate to me that the reality of accomplishing what he promised might not be as easy as saying he was going to accomplish it.
Andrea, I think you're exactly right about what he's saying. He's trying to backslide a little bit. He's trying to lower expectations. He's trying to say, some of these things can't happen overnight, or maybe the president doesn't have all this authority, or maybe we need to take our time. The grocery thing, the cost of living thing, I'll lump it all together because it's not just groceries. It's rent, it's heating fuel, especially where you are, part of the country you're in. We're going into the winter now and everything. And so we're in the middle of the winter now. So the cost of living, can you move up in your house? Have your rents going up? What are your energy costs? What are your food costs? What are your healthcare costs? He's clearly saying, maybe I can't do this overnight. Plus, he's, in a lot of meetings with his own people who are saying, sir, if you go ahead with mass deportations, you're going to disrupt the economy, and that will impact prices. Sir, if you go ahead with tariffs, you're going to disrupt the economy, and that's going to impact prices. Sir, this is a global thing, and, maybe Joe Biden didn't explain it well enough to people, but this is still a global, we're still coming out of the COVID hangover, and you have these global factors that even if, don't laugh at me, even if Donald Trump was perfect in implementing his policies, and nobody will be, but even if he was perfect, any president can only do so much, and any U.S. economic force, any governor can only do so much because we're now in a global economy. So I think you're exactly right. I think he is clearly understanding that he is likely to disappoint people if they think some of these promises are going to happen overnight. So I think a number of things. The burden here is going to be on governing. He won the popular vote. His people are really high right now about the prospect of Trump coming in. But I think it's dangerous. His undoing last time, we talked a little bit about this last week in the context of COVID. His undoing last time was the failure of his government to deliver on something big. In that case, it was a global pandemic, and it was mismanaged by the Trump administration. Here we go, right? He's got a very narrow majority in the House. It's a better majority, but he's got a few cranky, not Trumpy senators in the Senate, and a president only has so much power. So the challenge pretty quickly becomes governing and delivering results. Our job is to keep an open mind and see if he can, but I think you raise very important points that whatever you think of Donald Trump, he's not stupid. And I think he's seeing some of these things and he's saying, oh, this is going to be a little tougher. And those grand promises he threw up there in the campaign might be hard to keep.
But isn't the issue that the difficulty of making good on those promises should be obvious to anyone who is campaigning, certainly obvious to someone who's held the office before. Doesn't that sort of make it a more knowing lie or a misleading? I mean, wouldn't people, my question is really about, not that I expect him to be held to account, because that hasn't happened at all, but in his second incarnation, the idea that you could make promises about the way things happen in government and you've already done the job, so you know how difficult it is. I would like to think that there would be more accountability for the failure to deliver on those promises the second time around. I'm not dumb enough to believe that that'll happen, but we talked about the midterms last time.
Right.
Do you think there'll be any kind of an impact?
I think we have to see what happens, right? We have to see what the actual record is versus him retreating tells you that he sees this is going to be very difficult. He sees it as unlikely that he's going to be able to bring down prices right away, that he's going to be able to keep some of his other promises right away. So number one, we watch how it plays out. Number two, I think the midterms are certainly 2 years out. That is a definite test. We'll have some special elections for these House members who he is naming to his administration. You'll have the off-year elections next year in Virginia and New Jersey that are always sort of bellwethers of what's happening to a new president when they come into power. But I also think we will have, I don't put too much faith, and I don't think you should follow the polls from day to day, but we also will have public opinion polls. And look, Democrats are going to start off disappointed. There's probably a small group of Democrats in the middle who will say, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. We have one president at a time. Let's at least not throw harpoons on day one. But then I think the big test here is actually his people, because some of the Republicans who are not full Trumpers, but who just were exasperated with Biden, thought Harris was even left of Biden and just couldn't do it, who came back to the Republican fold, but somewhat reluctantly. That was Trump's margin of victory, right? Nikki Haley voters, other Republicans who had maybe voted for Biden in 2020 or sat out in 2020, who were so disenchanted with Biden, who said, all right, we're going to give Trump a chance again because I want the border closed and I want less regulation and I want lower taxes. What do they do? What do they do? And I think their exasperation was with what they had, the status quo. So they're willing to give Trump a chance. No, I think you're exactly right. Look, Donald Trump and the truth, are strangers. And I think, we don't read minds here, but a guy who had the job and a guy who's run a business, whether you think it's a huge business and a great business or a medium business, whatever, let's not have that debate today. He knows enough about the economy to know a lot of the stuff he promised during the campaign is not as easy as he made it sound. And so here comes the test, and the rubber will meet the road. That's a bad cliche, but we do have the elections that are a year and then 2 years down the road. But I think we'll also get some metrics first by watching public opinion, especially among the reluctant Trump voters.
So, John, one of the things, John King from CNN, that I can't quite figure out yet is whether or not our upcoming hostilities with Canada, based on Donald Trump's grievance with someone who worked in one of the Canadian secretaries and his unhappiness that he's expressed with Prime Minister Trudeau, is either evil genius or a distraction for Trump. In other words, is Donald Trump trying to help Canadians make a decision to get rid of Trudeau and put someone in who might be more pro-Trump friendly so that America can have an ally in Canada against Mexico and China in the trade wars? Or is Donald Trump just, living out the Simpsons episode where we get in a fight with Canada?
I'm going to vote the latter, in the sense that, again, I just said the truth and Donald Trump are strangers. Sometimes when you try to apply logic to Trump's decisions, you can just really get a headache. Trying to stretch it all out. In the sense, I mean it this way: that Justin Trudeau, Trump threatened the tariffs, and Trudeau took the initiative of coming to Mar-a-Lago to sit across from the President of the United States, who's not popular in Canada, but Trudeau understands, giant trading partner, important neighbor, economically, strategically. And so he came and made the gesture. And then Trump says, he calls him governor, says Canada's the 51st state. I want full disclosure, Chrystia Freeland, who's the minister who resigned, she used to be a Reuters correspondent here in Washington, D.C. She used to be a guest on my old show a long time ago. Really smart, interesting woman who made the decision to go home and get involved in the government and politics and all that. She said she couldn't work with Trudeau anymore. Look, there's some personal rivalry there. There's some difference of opinion over Trump there. There's politics at play there, which happened as well. But I would just say this. Number one, it's Trump meddling in the affairs of another country, number one. And number two, it's also a reminder, look around the world. Democracies are under stress right now. The French government is a mess. The German government is a mess. The Canadian government is now a mess. We're coming out of an election and trying to see what happens in our country with, yes, Trump and the Republicans won everything, but they don't have a huge majority, and it's going to be interesting to watch the challenge of governing. Again, I trace all of this back to the frustration with COVID, exhaustion with COVID, followed by the inevitable but very damaging to working class people economic upheaval that has people not trusting the people in power, not trusting the status quo. Trump took advantage of that. That's why he was elected again. And now he moves it. Now he's the guy, back to Andrea's point, he's the guy who's going to be governing in just a matter of weeks. And I would just remind him, for all the mischief he likes to play, look around the world. Some very astute politicians are in trouble because their people are restless and mad at institutions. And they're mad at big global institutions. Look what's happening on the front pages of the Globe every day. And your news conversations up there every day about Stewart. In healthcare, they're mad at the healthcare system. They're mad at institutions. They're mad at government. When people are this mad, yes, Trump just rode that anger and frustration, disaffection, pick your word for it. He just rode that word back into power. But when he takes his hand off the Bible, he's the guy with the title. He's the incumbent. So I would try to manage these expectations. Again, circling back to Andrea's point, I'd be careful because you're in the seat now and the people in the seat are getting whacked.
John, I have been watching with growing horror, first with the Washington Post and the LA Times declining to endorse in a presidential election, even to some degree, the New York Times deciding that they're only going to endorse in a presidential election and not even the local elections in New York. Now comes the news that ABC News, which had been sued by Trump for saying that he had been civilly adjudicated a rapist, which by my reading of the transcript and what the judge said, to me seems entirely accurate. They settled with him, and I will say this as an attorney. They were on the eve of depositions, both for him and for the folks on their side. They settled with him before a summary judgment motion. So for people who don't know what a summary judgment motion is, you routinely, motions to dismiss and summary judgment motions are filed in civil cases. A summary judgment motion says, here are the undisputed facts. Here are the facts that we don't dispute and that the other side does not dispute. And you ask the judge, based on those facts, to find in favor of the moving party. It is almost anathema to me in a civil case that one would settle before a summary judgment motion. And this to me sounds like obeying in advance. And, a free and unfettered press is essential to a healthy democracy. And I'm worried that that is what we're seeing. We're seeing the corporate folks go down to Mar-a-Lago and bend the knee. I'm worried that that is where the press is going. And I'd love to see hear your take on it. Even at this early stage, he hasn't, become president again. But even at this stage, what's your take on that?
Well, number one, he's very litigious, as you know, and he likes to sue people. He's now suing the Des Moines Register because a pollster I've known for more than 3 decades, she had a poll that turned out to be way wrong. She had a poll that turned out to be way wrong, but she didn't, he's now saying it was done with malice. It was done to try to flip votes. I think that he's going to have a very hard time proving that, but he's suing them. It's just the idea being that he's trying to intimidate people by just the prospect that if you cross me, I will sue you, and that ties everything up.
And it's what he's always done, just for people who don't know. He did this even as a developer in New York. He was famous for it.
Right. He's done that for when people say, you hired me to, plow your street. I plowed your street. You need to pay me. You hired me to put the cabinets in Taj Mahal. You owe me. And he sues and tries to get a dime on the dollar. This has been the story of his life. Yes, that's all well documented. He'll probably sue me for saying that. Look, they threaten lawsuits all the time. I think you have 2 separate issues here. I don't know what happened in the ABC case. You're absolutely right that the judge used that word and then ABC used it on the air. It was not what the finding was in the end, right? The finding was not that. And so I'm not a lawyer, but these things can normally be, you're right that they did it. So my guess here is that there was something if they went to discovery, there was something in some text or something in some emails that ABC decided, let's just make this go away. We're going to make this go away. We're going to pay a charity. That's my guess. I could be wrong about that. And I don't like to speak for another news organization. I know they threaten to sue CNN all the time. They have sued CNN in the past. We'll see what happens there. The other issue to me is the more fundamental one in that when these billionaires came in, our business has been struggling, right? I work on the TV side. A lot of people cut the cord during COVID. So you're shifting to a digital. People more and more are getting their news here on their phones or here on the radio or through podcasts or when there are people listening to us live. There are other people who will listen to this later because it's recorded. They can get it on YouTube. They can find it other places. So our business is adapting. And the newspaper industry was struggling the most because all the car ads are gone. The car ads are now on the internet. And so the newspaper industry was struggling. And so there was a hallelujah when these billionaires came in, right? Because they promised to invest in the newsrooms. And you had Rupert Murdoch at the Wall Street Journal. Most of the people I know who work at the Journal are happy. They see, Rupert might have changed the editorial page, but he doesn't mess with the editorial people, the news reporters. But you have at the LA Times and at the Washington Post now, billionaires who appear to, want to be Donald Trump's friends. In the case of Jeff Bezos, a billionaire who has a lot of interest before the United States government. And so that part, the quote unquote independent part, right? You'd love a billionaire who says, hire all the reporters you want, hire more editors, study the digital piece, revolutionize the newspaper. I'm staying out of it. I want to wash my hands. I'm going to be Pontius Pilate. I got nothing to do with this. You'd love that. But that's not happening. So I think our business at every level is in an evolution and a revolution and a lot of tough conversations anyway. And then you add Trump to it and the threat of lawsuits, just technology and the changing world and the things that define themselves as media organizations that I don't think any of the three of us would consider to be quote unquote news media, but they have the right to the First Amendment too. So we were in this weird spot anyway. And now you have the billionaire question, and now you have a guy who's going to sue you if you do anything that crosses him. So what do? I always say when things get most confusing and most crowded and most cluttered, go back to the basics, which is be fair, be factual, think twice, and then report things. And if you have things to say about Donald Trump that are tough, that are negative, and you can back up with facts, then you should say them. And you should not shy away from that just because he's going to sue you or he's going to threaten to sue you. But just do what you're always supposed to do. Do the honest to God, tough shoe leather reporting, the building blocks of journalism. And yes, bring in a second and a third editor. Bring in a second or a third voice. Maybe bring a smart attorney like you into the conversation to say, look at this. Here's our facts. Here's this, here's that. Scrub everything. So that maybe takes a couple extra hours or a couple extra days. But do the work and don't back down just because he's trying to intimidate you. That's what he wants. Don't rush things to air if you're not absolutely sure. But you should do that whether Donald Trump's there or not.
John, we've also seen, Kash Patel, who's coming in maybe as the director of the FBI, threatening to sue an MSNBC commentator for saying factual things on the air. Do you think this threat of suit may realign the broadcast media and opinion media to move back from commentary and opinion and more to, as your point, the sort of shoe leather, cross the T's, dot the I's reporting?
So I'm an old AP Wire guy, so my default is always going to be toward reporting. However, the commentary part, the analysis part from smart people is important. Here's where I think the business fails sometimes, which is that we're all in boxes, right? So I'm in a box. We're doing this on YouTube right now, even though it's a radio show. I'm in one box, you're in another box. Let's say we brought in, David Axelrod and, Jason Miller from Trump's staff, right? They would be in boxes too. I think one place the business fails sometimes, we assume the viewers know this, is to clearly identify people. John King is a reporter and a correspondent. David Axelrod is a Democratic strategist who worked in the White House for Barack Obama. This is an opinion. This is a reporter. And to be more transparent in how we take an extra few minutes. Yes, it takes extra few seconds, Yeah, it takes time out of the program. But to clearly identify somebody. On the fonts, you have the labels you have on the TV beneath you or the radio show, wherever venue you're doing it in, make sure people are clearly identified. And make sure if they have a bias, it's clearly identified. That protects you somewhat. And then when you're doing the factual stuff, number one, double check, triple check, quadruple check if it's sensitive and necessary, run those tests. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with having a conversation with your hired analysts. A lot of these people are paid by the networks, right? The people on MSNBC or CNN or somewhere else, to have a conversation with them about, look, he's litigious. We want you to be bold. We want you to be daring. But just think, you're smart people too. These people are usually good political strategists or excellent attorneys. Just make sure they're thinking twice and not let. I always say, I'm on live television all the time. My tongue gets out ahead of your brain sometimes. It just does. Welcome to being a human being. Try to think twice and don't be afraid to stop yourself and say, let me say that again. But I just think using, common sense and good rules and basic journalism and ethic guidelines, we should always use those. We should not, and if we have to, maybe improve the system a little bit or go back to school a little bit, get some retraining a little bit, fine. But don't be intimidated. just because they say they have an enemies list or they're coming after you. I would also say this, though, about people like Kash Patel. There are a lot of people who say, oh, he doesn't belong in the job, oh, this, oh, that. Let's see how the hearings play out. For those who are whacking and beating up on the Trump appointees, I would say this: do it on substance, do it on facts, make your case. Don't try to convince people that just because he's not on the establishment list of who should be the FBI director, that shouldn't be him. Because again, a lot of people, not just Trump voters, are mad at the establishment, are mad at the same old way and the same old people. And they're actually very eager to see some new people and new approaches in these jobs. So don't just don't broad brush say this guy's from the fringe. If you're going to attack somebody, do it with specifics. And then if you don't want to get sued, make sure you can back up your specifics with facts.
John King, as always, I am grateful for you and appreciate everything that you bring to every single segment that you do. Thank you, and happy holidays to you.
Same to you both. It's great to be with you.
Thanks, John. John King, CNN Chief National Correspondent. You know, it's funny, I changed my X handle from just Sue O'Connell to Sue O'Connell, a commentator, not a reporter. Because I get bashed all the time. Why do you have this opinion? It's like, because that's what I get paid to do.
People do the same thing with me on this show. I've had to say to people, I'm not a journalist. I'm not a reporter. I'm actually kind of a regular person like you with opinions, and they allow me to do this. So, yeah.
Well, we're grateful for that, too. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to open up the phone lines. I know you've been waiting for this about your office holiday party. Is it mandatory fun? Is it genuinely enjoyable time with the people who, let's face it, you spend most of your waking hours with anyway, so you might as well have some drinks and some finger food.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Standish Village in Dorchester's Lower Mills, providing assisted living residents with programs designed to help seniors stay sharp, social, and independent. Learn more at standishvillage.com/programs. And the Hanover Theater. You can light up your holiday season with New England's largest production of A Christmas Carol, December 15th through 22nd, sponsored by Assumption University. Tickets at thehanovertheater.org.
In recent years, more and more countries have been closing their borders to migrants. Thailand is bucking the trend by creating a path to citizenship for almost 500,000 stateless people living there.
It's so bold that they can really serve as an inspiration for this region, but also on a global scale.
Local woman, and we're both in for Jim and Margery. We're live at the Boston Public Library. We're also streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Margery will be back tomorrow. We're ending the show today by asking you at 877-301-8970 about the office holiday party. It's a big grab bag topic. For some industries, they're making a comeback after COVID-19. For others, there's a big bash at the end of the year when your company faces layoffs. If you do that, you might feel a little tone deaf. Or are you working from home where if you're going to have an office party, it means everybody just decorates their own space, buys their own liquor, eats their own food, and everybody watches everybody else on Zoom? Are you joining on the in-person work-sanctioned afternoon of carousing with coworkers? 877-301-8970, from the champagne fountains to the budget affairs. Let us know your thoughts about the office holiday party. Do you go to them? Do you dread them? Maybe you like the chance to let loose with your coworkers, since it's only once a year? Or is the stress of the holidays just too much and another event that's just going to push you over the edge? And Sue had a side issue. She was reminiscing this morning about the fact that office holiday parties of yore, before everybody's phone had a camera attached to it, she apparently liked all the bad antics that were never acceptable, but at least were tolerated. You should weigh in on that, too, the do's and don'ts of office holiday parties. We definitely want to know if you've ever behaved in a way at a holiday party that caused you to get fired before the new year came around. 877-301-8970, call or text.
You know, I just want to set the stage for this, Andrea. Let's talk to one of my mentors, one of my idols in office life, Michael Scott from The Office. This is how he laid out the ideal office party.
I want people to cut loose. I want people making out in closets. I want people hanging from the ceilings, lampshades on the heads. I want it to be a Playboy Mansion party.
You do realize that we can't serve liquor at the party.
Yeah, I know. Stupid corporate wet blankets. Like booze ever killed anybody.
And that was why their parties were always just
off
such
the hook,
successes.
Yes. So I love the holiday party in the same way I love the summer outing. That the entire, and having been a boss, I've actually owned small companies and had to make outings, make plans for outings. people complain if they have to do them, and they complain if you don't do them. Like when I worked at the Boston Phoenix, we would all get in boats and go out to George's Island. And then one year we decided, I know we're talking summer party, but the same thing, we were not going to do that. And then everyone complained that we didn't have a summer party. So I'm saying let's have holiday parties. If your company isn't able to do it for one reason or another, find a way to celebrate with your coworkers.
Well,
How about you?
I think SNL was reading your mind. Here's a clip from a 2014 SNL musical sketch. Pete Davidson and Jay Farrow spice up a boring office holiday party.
Office Christmas party. Randy made a slideshow but can't work the projector. Office Christmas party. Carol from the media is way too drunk. Office Christmas party. Carol from the media just opened to the Christmas tree. Office Christmas party. Someone control Carol from new media. This is getting out of hand. We love that people are having fun, but do us a favor and just be safe, guys. Oh snap! The boss is making it rain. Give cards.
So that's the kind of Christmas party that you're lamenting.
Yes.
People just don't have anymore.
No. So
where
we
you
tried to
can't
bring them
control
back.
Carol from new media.
Right, and I understand that bad things happen. Sometimes criminal things happen. But at the same time, we're all on our best behavior now. Let's look at Caroline's calling in from Newton. Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
Welcome to our show.
Hi. Oh, thank you. I've called before, but it's so nice to speak with both of you. I enjoy both of you when you're on.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for a long, long time. And the hospital that I work in now, it's under a very large, wealthy business owned by, and they don't do anything for us. So I would love to have an office party.
Do you get anything? Do you get a bonus? Do you get money? Because I'm always happy to take money over anything. But do you get money?
Money would be great. No.
A jacket, a quarter
we got
zip.
Some ice. We had an ice cream social yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Where we went to the cafeteria. We got a scoop of ice cream. We got to put toppings on it, and that was our big treat, I guess.
Okay.
I know I sound really cynical.
No, I feel sad for you.
No,
but is it?
I'm hopefully getting some people together this afternoon at a local place, and we'll have our own fun.
Caroline, I'm just curious because I'm reading this story in Axios about Gen Z sort of opting more for experiences versus the kind of classic office party and what those experiences look like. But do you have, you're working at a hospital, do you have the kind of environment there where it just doesn't lend itself to organizing something like this? Or have you had them in years past and now all of a sudden they're just not happening?
Yeah, I think most of the time they're just not happening.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you give us a call back at the beginning of the year and let us know how your get together got.
Hopefully you get to do. Yeah, and thank you
Caroline,
for organizing something.
Yeah, 877-301-8970 is our number to call or text. We've got an anonymous texter, to quote David from Schitt's Creek. Ew, office parties are not introvert friendly. I'm not going. Nope. There is a bit of that challenge of going, especially if there have been, and there's also the story that we were going to reference too about how some spouses aren't invited to holiday parties. That this from the Wall Street Journal, they will have a holiday party, but no spouses. I think it's doubly stressful for people sometimes. You're meeting a spouse that you've only seen once a year. You can't remember their name. The spouse may not know who anybody is. And let's face it, if you're working in the office, you have all of these inside jokes with everybody that go on and on and on. And then your poor spouse or guest just gets totally left out of it.
Yeah, and if you're having an affair with somebody at the office, it's probably a lot more convenient if your spouse isn't invited to the party. We have another anonymous texter who says, my cheap company had it at an impressive venue and only ordered the lowest tier. This goes to your point about people complaining whether you have it or not, but only ordered the lowest tier food. It was awful, but they could brag that they held it at an upscale hotel. I don't know why, but I just found that text very funny.
No, very funny. All right, let's go to Tamara.
Hi, Tamara.
Car.
Hello, ladies.
Hi.
So I worked for a large company in sales. Am I echoing?
You're okay. Go ahead. Thanks for checking. Go ahead.
So worked for a large company in sales, and they did two things. One year, they made us do an escape room. And they always talked about inclusivity, but I think they forgot about people who have anxiety. And then, the next year gets better. They take us out to dinner at a casino, and then afterwards, they say, go play in the casino. They give us no money. But then that night, they say, if you've been drinking, you have to stay overnight, but you have to share a room with one of your workmates.
Oh, my, this is just a recipe for disaster.
I think I want to go work there. What's the can you DM me the company?
Yes. But can I tell you, though, the worst thing is that I got penalized for leaving and not staying the night.
Yeah.
Wow, that's just, there's so much to unpack with that last party. There's a lot to unpack there in terms of various judgments made by the company at any given time. That's,
Well, you've left us speechless, Tamara.
Right. And Sue definitely wants to know.
I definitely want to go there. Thanks for calling. 877-301-8970 to call or text. We're talking about office holiday parties. Does your company have them? Do you go? Do you not go? Do you feel trapped? You can call or text. The judgment, I think, in this happens across all size companies, but in some of the smaller companies, if you have a holiday party, you're expected to go. It's not necessarily an option. And if you don't go, your boss might be upset with you, or if they have it in their home, which is another challenge.
Right.
And to the person's point about having anxiety, it's hard enough to work in an office space if you're not really a social person. I certainly work with a lot of colleagues who keep their headphones on all the time, and we give them space and don't, jibber jabber over their space too much. But if you're expected to then go and perform at this party, it's a lot.
Well, if you're not going to do just sort of the standard office party where everybody knows it's going to come around once a year, people are allowed to show up, make an appearance. They can stay longer if they want to. They can bring, spouses or significant others. That's like kind of the standard party. Everybody kind of knows what to expect. If you're going to do something like an escape room, good to find out if people have claustrophobia, don't like being, in confined spaces with a bunch of other people, or a casino, do people have a gambling problem? If you're going to plan something like that, then you need to kind of ask your staff what kind of experience they would like and try to get a consensus around something like that. Otherwise, you end up sort of in Tamara's position, which is unenviable, to say the least.
Yeah.
So, Mary, you're in the car. How do you feel about office parties?
Well, I used to work at Stewart before I retired due to an injury. And we had, the doctors used to pay for the staff to have parties. And then, working for Stewart, it eventually got pretty bad and everybody got demoralized and the doctors stopped having parties for the staff at Christmas. And the first time they did that, everybody was so down, I decided, well, I'll try to do something. And so I did I came up with like a Yankee Dare because I couldn't do a full-out party because I was just like a nurse practitioner. So on my dime, I did Yankee Dare and I invited whoever wanted to come and I got like sort of like a combination of gag gifts but nice gifts and whatever staff wanted to come. And most of them came and it would be like, for a bottle of wine that was wrapped, it would be like the Fat Bastard wine or the, like those gag gifts of like the sticky giant cockroaches you throw them on a window and then they sort of slowly roll down the window, or lottery tickets, fetch tickets and stuff. And everything was wrapped and you draw a number. And before you unwrap, you have to decide if you're going to swap with somebody. And I got food and stuff. And people just lifted their spirit so much. It was so worth it to do it for people. And it made me feel so good.
That's
despite
good.
What we were all going through.
Those are popular. Yankee Dares and Yankee Swaps are really very popular, and they're fun.
And the small department, when you do it among your own department, it also makes it a little bit more intimate and a little bit more fun as well.
But good on you, Mary, for doing it on your own dime.
I'd love to hear from a man who organized the Yankee swap. Do you think that we're going to find that somewhere? No. Am I being too bitter, Jamie? Again, I'm being bitter again. I'm sorry. All right, Anonymous. The main reason I went to the office parties was the same as going to weddings, to dance all night. There you go. And if the party sucked, I'd check out the other office parties being held in the other rooms at the venue. I also went if that was when they gave out the bonus checks and left immediately for the bank. Yeah, see, the dancing.
He or she has a strategy.
I love
this.
it. I
Definitely,
love it. Totally
definitely.
love it.
And one of our, Heather from Medford, says she was at a company that gave out turkeys at lunchtime, but they wouldn't let us leave. There was one refrigerator. 5 people got their turkeys safe in the cold. The rest of us had to keep our turkeys on our desks all day. I worked there one year and ran at the first opportunity, not to mention all of the people who died from botulism.
Yeah, well, there were a lot of job openings come February.
That's a good way to keep turnover up. Right,
turnover.
Attrition is pretty steady at my company.
Staff.
We eat botulist turkey.
Let's go to Lainey in the car.
Hi, Lainey.
Welcome to Boston Public Radio.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I have a good story. 23 years ago, I'm a nurse. I got a job at a doctor's office. And by December, when we went to our Christmas party at the Capitol Grill, the doctor, my boss, was a little drunk. And he announced to the whole party that he had found his soulmate and that he was finally madly in love. And everybody looked around, and it was me.
And?
And I was shocked and asked for another drink. And anyway, so the story goes on, and after 7 years, I finally agreed to marry him.
There you go.
After 7 years.
I knew there was going to be a happy ending.
7 years. It took me 7 years, but we've been married for 16 years now. So.
I knew there was a happy ending coming.
Can I just ask, were you dating him before he made this announcement?
No.
That's the part that I kind of can't wrap my head around, is that he kind of stand up and say it to someone who has absolutely no idea that that's how you feel. In front of everyone.
At the office holiday. See, this is why office holiday parties are important.
That's probably why a lot of people do go, just in the hope that something like this will happen. So, Lainey, well, congratulations, because ultimately it worked out for you. It could have been a lot worse for him that night had you stood up and said, I have no idea what you're talking about, and I never want to talk to you again.
Oh, that wouldn't happen. But it is a happy ending, and it's a true story.
All right, Lainey, thank you for calling in. It's going to be hard to top that one. Let me just let you know. Thank you for calling. We're taking your calls and texts about the holiday party. 877-301-8970. Call or text.
Judy from Methuen says an employer had an experience, quote unquote, lunchtime party for employees only. The experience was a cooking lesson where we prepared our own meal, some kind of steak. No option for vegetarians. Most of the employees were women with families who would have to prepare dinner for families when they went home. I thought it was a little tone deaf.
Yeah, it's funny, to the experience idea, like the younger people, the people under 35, they all want to have these great experiences, but they're also a lot of work. And, we have a lot at NBC 10 Boston and NBC. We have a great DEI, diversity initiative stuff going on, and we have events every single week. And, sometimes I get a little tired making the charcuterie board to honor whatever group we're honoring this week. But I do agree, it is a lot of fun and a lot of celebration and a way to get together. But again, if you're going home to cook meals, that's why you have to have committees.
Right.
And that's why I don't like committees.
And volunteers.
Yeah,
Committees and
it's a lot.
volunteers
It's
are
a
people
lot.
who really want to do this stuff.
Yes.
Let's talk to Nahit in Chelmsford. I always mispronounce
Chelmsford.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Just a quick, long time ago, my husband was invited to a party that was for the whole weekend, from Friday all the way to Sunday night.
Wow.
And the hotel, or they were out of city somewhere, but it was not disclosed to anybody, not to me. And it was very upsetting because I couldn't get a hold of my husband for the whole weekend. And I don't have any relatives, any family, any kids or anything like that. So when he came back, I was pissed.
Wait, what? Can I just ask what kind of industry he works in or worked in?
No, it's communications, and the company is no longer there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it is right to even say the name of the company. Maybe I shouldn't.
No, that's okay. We won't get you in trouble. But one of the main lessons that I have tried to teach my daughter, and I think that there are a lot of important lessons that people should know. And one of them, I think, Andrea, is if a rich person invites you on your boat and you don't know who they are, don't go. If a rich person invites you away for a weekend, meet me at Logan Airport. We're going to get on my private plane and we're going to go somewhere. Do not go.
Was this a situation where he felt like if he didn't go, there would be consequences work-wise?
No.
Oh, he just wanted to go.
There were hundreds of people.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he wanted to go. Yeah. And at first he said he was not going to go because I was really worried about a lot of alcohol and drugs. And he said none of the spouses, nobody was invited, just the employees. I was worried. Not that I'm thinking at his 60s or whatever he would do anything. But I was really upset. What if there was an emergency? And I needed to get a hold of him. Not just me, other people. Why would they not disclose the location or a telephone number so we could call?
So I assume he's still your husband.
He is. We were pretty close.
Oh,
okay, good. All right. Well, that's another great.
What happened is I called the company the week after, and I talked to the management, and I explained my frustrations and what if. And she said I did not do that. It was the director, and the director had said no relatives, no spouses. It is just for the employees for the weekend. Yep.
All right, we're just getting good ones, one after another.
She and her husband, they worked through it. They worked through it.
877-301-8970. Your holiday story. We've got Anonymous. I'm a man who held a Christmas party with clients of my photography business with a Yankee swap. Well, congratulations. We found you. Not one person swapped. Everyone was happy with what they got. Boring.
He picked pretty good gifts. Usually you throw one absolutely horrific gift in there that people just keep passing around.
Every time I've done a Yankee swap and there's been alcohol involved, the person who's a recovering alcoholic ends up with the alcohol.
Yeah, you would think that there'd be a way to figure out how to not do that, but no.
Okay.
Another anonymous texter tells us office holiday celebrations aren't difficult and gives us a list.
Okay.
Very helpfully. 1, do not make them mandatory. 2, make sure the food is great. 3, give gifts of value, preferably not loaded with the company logo. And 4, be lenient in the days following. Rounding up with 5, cash is always a good alternative. I think that number 5, those are just words to live by generally. Cash works no matter who you are, no matter what the situation.
And here's an experience party from Jonathan with the Cocktail Guru. They do a corporate team building mixology classes at holiday parties, so that could be fun.
That could be good. You're probably mixing and sampling and mixing.
Yep, we've had dumpling making at NBC 10
really?
Over at one holiday. What else have we had? We've had yoga. So we've had these things, but not as a holiday party.
Do a variety of things.
We do a variety of things every single week. There is an event happening, but we're not having a holiday party this year, though. But maybe next year.
One of our other texters says, "I have an end of the year office party. I'm a dog walker. I invite all of this. I love this already. I invite all of the owners to hang out with their pups." This is the best thing I've read all day. Each pup gives a human a gift with a letter written from their pup. I want to know who this person is, and I want to take them to lunch. It's a blast, and most people try to make it. I love everything about that.
That's good. All right, here's Anonymous. I'm friendly with my coworkers, but not friends. For company parties, I just make an excuse like my dog is going to be sick that night, or the night conflicts with my hot air balloon piloting classes, or something else like that. So obviously does not want to attend the holiday party.
And one of our other anonymous texters, I'm not surprised that this person wants to remain anonymous, said they were dancing at one office party when a drunk HR manager.
Always the HR manager.
Grabbed this person's buttocks. The person says they didn't quite know what to do. After that, like, who do you report it to? Because the person that did it is actually your HR manager.
Yes. So, like I said, some bad things have happened in the past at the holiday parties. And, when I worked at KISS 108 back in the 1980s.
I didn't know you worked at KISS 108 back in the 1980s.
Indeed I did.
Learn something new about you, local woman, every time we co-host.
Yes, and our parties were off the hook, but we also felt that we had so much fun most of the time that by the time we got to the holiday party, it wasn't really that big a deal. And I do remember over WBCN, they used to have a no-spouse holiday party. I don't know what happened there. I'm still trying to find that out.
That may end up being hidden forever in the lore of WBCN.
Yep.
That's entirely possible. So another one of our texters says that they used to give each of the staff $25 in advance of the company party and ask them to give it away. At the party, everyone would have to tell the story of what happened to their giving adventure. One young man wrapped the money in gold foil and stuck it in the book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at the library. A young girl found it, donated it to another charity. It hit the newspapers and inspired others to do the same. That's Michelle from Chester, Vermont.
That's a great
People
story.
People really do have lovely ideas for how to be kind and sort of pay it forward.
I like that. Be kind.
Yeah,
All right.
it
Thanks
is great.
to everybody for texting and calling us and telling us stories. We'll be telling our family on the holidays. We're going to switch over now and revisit with our friend Jared Bowen.
I know, it's great when Jared is back. Where is he?
Where's Jared? Joining us on the Zoom to talk about his upcoming show, the Culture Show. What's coming up,
Well,
Jared?
I would just say we had our holiday party yesterday at GBH, which is why Jim and Margery are not here hosting the show today. Between Jim's interpretive dance, he couldn't rally this morning. Margery is still doing the Taylor Swift catalog on karaoke in Studio B. Nobody told her that it's over yet, but she's still going.
I like it.
The Margery Egan tour versus the Eras tour.
What's coming up on the Culture Show?
We are speaking with Mary Grant, the president of Mass Art, who, of course, is one of our regulars. We're going to be talking about a few issues, like the mayor expanding her free admission program, also the conflict, maybe we'll say, at Northeastern University, where they have installed public art and some of the students would like it removed because it interferes with their photographs of themselves on graduation day. So we'll talk about that, among other issues. Also, a really interesting one, that our brains fire 10% more when we see art in person as opposed to just posters or whatnot. And then we turn to our cocktail guru, Jonathan Pogash, for Radio on the Rocks. He will walk us through great holiday cocktails to be making for our parties.
Art is life, Jared. Thank you for bringing us life today.
We try.
Thanks, Jared. All right, that'll do it. Maybe Jim and Margery will make it back from their holiday party tomorrow.
Just the image of Margery performing the Taylor Swift catalog alone inside of a studio, singing her little heart out, not knowing that the party is completely over, is just hilarious.
Have you ever been to a party with Jim Browdy?
I don't. You know what? I have known him for well over 20 years.
Yeah.
And I've never been to a party with Jim Browdy.
I've never been to a party with Jim Browdy either. I've been to a party with Margery Egan.
He's a foodie. He gives great gifts, great food
Oh, you get gifts?
and champ. Well, I have, yeah. He hasn't given you anything?
No.
Oh, good.
What's trending? What's